Mesdames et messieurs, je vais vous demander de regagner vos places. La séance va débuter. La séance est ouverte. Chers collègues, je rappelle que vous devez insérer votre carte de vote et l'y laisser pendant au moins 30 secondes pour prendre la parole ou voter. Pour demander la parole, veuillez appuyer sur le bouton « Request ». En outre, je vous rappelle que les membres n'ayant pas soumis de déclaration annuelle d'intérêt devront commencer leur intervention par une déclaration d'intérêt orale conformément au paragraphe 20 du Code de conduite des membres de l'Assemblée parlementaire. Je vous rappelle enfin de donner la parole à un maximum d'intervenants. Le temps de parole lors des discussions de ce matin est limité à 3 minutes pour les porte-paroles des groupes politiques et à 2 minutes pour les orateurs. L'ordre du jour appelle la présentation et la discussion du rapport de Madame Elisabetta Gardini au nom de la Commission des questions politiques et de la démocratie sur les violences et discours de haine contre les responsables politiques, une menace pour la démocratie, ainsi que de l'avis présenté par Madame Yevgenia Kravchuk au nom de la Commission sur l'égalité et la non-discrimination. Nous vous rappelons qu'en raison de la séance des questions à Monsieur Alain Berset, secrétaire général du Conseil de l'Europe, nous serons obligés de suspendre vers 12h10. Celui-ci poursuivra cet après-midi. Madame la rapporteure, vous disposez d'un temps de parole de 7 minutes pour présenter votre rapport et de 3 minutes pour répondre aux orateurs. Madame la rapporteure Gardini, vous avez la parole.
Sì, grazie Presidente. Cari colleghi, oggi affrontiamo un tema che non riguarda soltanto chi svolge un mandato pubblico, riguarda più in profondità la qualità della nostra democrazia. Quando nel confronto pubblico si diffondono intimidazioni, minacce, campagne d'odio e violenza, non si colpisce soltanto una persona, si colpisce il principio stesso della rappresentanza democratica, si restringe lo spazio della libertà politica, si indebolisce il rapporto di fiducia tra cittadini e istituzioni. È di quello che oggi noi parliamo. In molti Stati membri del Consiglio d'Europa purtroppo assistiamo a un aumento di gravi episodi contro eletti, amministratori locali, candidati e rappresentanti pubblici. Però sarebbe un errore leggere tutto questo fenomeno come una questione interna alla politica. Non è così, il punto vero è un altro. Se chi si impegna nella vita pubblica viene intimidito, minacciato o ridotto al silenzio, a perdere non è una categoria, a perdere sono i cittadini, soprattutto i cittadini, perché si impoverisce il pluralismo, si altera il confronto democratico e si scoraggia la partecipazione. La violenza non nasce mai all'improvviso, spesso cresce lentamente attraverso la normalizzazione dell'insulto, della delegittimazione sistematica, delle molestie, molto spesso online, e quando questo clima si trasferisce nella realtà può degenerare in aggressioni fisiche e nei casi più estremi anche in omicidi. Purtroppo l'abbiamo visto spesso. Dobbiamo anche avere l'onestà di riconoscere che in molti paesi europei esiste una frattura sempre più evidente tra cittadini e classi dirigenti. Troppi percepiscono la politica come distante, autoreferenziale, incapace di ascoltare davvero quelle che sono le paure, quelli che sono i bisogni e le difficoltà concrete dei cittadini. Ma proprio per questo noi dobbiamo essere ancora più chiari. La sfiducia, anche quando è profonda, non può mai trasformarsi in odio e tantomeno in violenza. Riaffermiamo qui che in democrazia il dissenso è legittimo, anzi è più che legittimo. La critica è legittima anche quando è aspra, però non lo sono la disumanizzazione, le minacce, le molestie mirate e l'incitamento alla violenza. Tutto questo non è legittimo. Il rapporto distingue bene queste parti. Siamo stati attenti perché la critica anche dura, la contestazione, persino la satira, appartengono al pluralismo democratico, anzi sono proprio un'espressione, un sintomo che la democrazia è sana, è in buona salute. Dobbiamo poter esprimere il dissenso anche in modo vivace, l'abbiamo ricordato anche oggi nelle ultime ore di lavoro nella Commissione. Però la tenuta dello spazio democratico di fronte a certe manifestazioni di violenza la vediamo a rischio. Perché quando la violenza entra stabilmente nel confronto pubblico produce effetti molto concreti, effetti che sono proprio dannosi per la democrazia. Questo vale soprattutto a livello locale, dove sindaci, consiglieri, amministratori sono spesso i più esposti perché sono quelli più vicini ai cittadini, sono quelli più facilmente raggiungibili. E alla lunga tutto questo impoverisce la rappresentanza, riduce il pluralismo e rende la democrazia più fragile. Allora, per spezzare questo circolo vizioso serve una risposta seria, equilibrata e non ideologica. Credo sia quello che abbiamo fatto insieme, trasversalmente, lavorando a questo rapporto. Anzitutto abbiamo riaffermato un principio semplice: la partecipazione alla vita pubblica deve essere libera dalla paura. E questo in fondo lo spirito dei principi di Reykjavik per la democrazia adottati nel 2023 dai capi di Stato e di Governo del Consiglio d'Europa. In secondo luogo servono strumenti concreti e il rapporto contiene raccomandazioni che vanno proprio in questa direzione. Adottare norme adeguate contro le diverse forme di violenza, contrastare la diffusione di contenuti che incitano all'odio e alla violenza, compresi quelli manipolati, senza comprimere però la libertà di espressione. Questo anche è una stella polare che dobbiamo sempre tenere presente e difendere. Quindi rafforzare la capacità di risposta delle autorità competenti, promuovere educazione civica, alfabetizzazione mediatica e responsabilità nel dibattito pubblico. Allargare gli spazi di partecipazione democratica e di confronto autentico con i cittadini. È altrettanto essenziale che le istituzioni proteggano tutte le voci politiche in modo uguale, senza filtri ideologici, senza doppi standard. La violenza va condannata sempre, indipendentemente da chi ne sia vittima e da quale sia il suo orientamento politico. Anzi, mi sembra di ricordare che forse proprio già in quest'Aula, riferendosi ad altre situazioni, si è detto, o sicuramente almeno in Commissione, che se più la violenza è percepita vicina alla tua parte politica e più devi essere tu a reagire contro questa violenza, anche verbale. E questo mi sembra un principio molto sano. E anche per questo è utile la proposta di creare un meccanismo di monitoraggio a livello del Consiglio d'Europa capace di raccogliere dati, individuare tendenze e aiutare le autorità nazionali e locali a prevenire meglio questi fenomeni. Cari colleghi, io devo dire che voglio già anticipatamente ringraziare tutti coloro che hanno collaborato alla stesura di questo rapporto, a meglio definirlo e rifinirlo. E credo che nel principio si sia raggiunta una unanimità che raramente si riesce a vedere con tale forza. Ogni volta che la violenza sostituisce il confronto, la democrazia arretra. Questo è un principio su cui tutti quanti abbiamo convenuto. Ogni volta che la paura prende il posto della libertà politica, perdono i cittadini e questo è il punto essenziale. Per questo io vi invito a sostenere questo rapporto non per difendere una categoria, ma per difendere una democrazia nella quale il dissenso resti libero, il confronto resti civile e la partecipazione resti possibile. Le idee si combattono con altre idee, mai con l'odio, mai con la minaccia, mai con la violenza. Per questo io vi invito a votare a favore, perché quando la paura entra nella politica, la libertà esce dalla democrazia. Grazie.
Merci Madame la rapporteure. Madame Yevgenia Kravchuk, vous avez la parole pour présenter l'avis de la Commission sur l'égalité et la non-discrimination.
I'd like to thank Madame Rapporteur for this very timely report, and I think this report is probably one of the most, I would say, catching eye and catching attention during this session. And you can see that from the number of people who signed to speak today. This report clearly shows that violence and hate speech against politicians are no longer isolated phenomena, and it's a systematic problem, and it directly affects not just us as people, but it affects democracy and the quality of our democracies. And what we see today that those who are most exposed are also those whose voices we cannot afford to lose, and they are under even bigger pressure. So these are women in politics, these are young politicians, these are representatives of different minorities, representatives of LGBTI community. And very often it's not about the direct attacks, but also it's about the constant pressure and harassment, especially in the online sphere. And of course, it's really important not to mix up things about the freedom of speech, the free debate. I mean, these 80 people are going to debate with this report, and that's a normal process. But if it's the constant hate speech and also it's the constant harassment, it will have, and it does have, a chilling effect. People start to self-censor, withdraw, and decide not to enter public life at all. Thank you for the committee to accept the amendments tabled by the Equality Committee. We will proceed with them, and I think they will enrich the report. Thank you.
Merci Madame la rapporteure pour avis. Nous allons passer à la discussion générale. Je vous rappelle que la durée d'intervention est limitée à 3 minutes pour les porte-paroles des groupes politiques et à 2 minutes par orateur. Dans la discussion générale, la parole est à Madame Maria Sirangela du groupe PPE.
Okay, thank you. Across Europe, we see and we are witnessing a disturbing normalization of threats, harassment and intimidation directed at elected representatives. We see that systematic hate speech seeks to silence opponents, shame individuals publicly, destroy reputations and exclude those with different views from public debate. Too often, parliamentary members are facing threats, curses, harassment and aggressive targeting in public life and online, especially in social media. Too often, disagreement is turning into hatred, and we know that hatred can easily turn into violence. What is worse, though, is that this hate speech is supported by the opposite political parties, especially radical ones, and their representatives. Despite the lessons of the past, populism is still here, and we see it rising again, not only in Europe, but across the world. I speak not only in principle, but from personal experience. I have been a victim of hateful abuse. I even received social media comments wishing death upon my children. No parent, no public representative should ever have to face such cruelty. I would also like to add the dimension of political hate speech directed particularly at women, minorities, and of course LGBTQI community. We are too often targeted not for our ideas, but for who we are through sexism, racism, homophobia, and other forms of prejudice. Such abuse sends a dangerous message that public life is reserved only for those willing to endure humiliation and threats. As a result, many Women, talented women and members of minority communities choose not to enter politics at all. This is not only a personal loss for them, but a democratic loss for all of us. When fear drives people away from public service, our institutions become less representative, less inclusive, and less legitimate. All this, of course, poisons democratic regimes. As Europeans, we must respond together. First, online platforms must act responsibly and transparently against coordinated hate campaigns, threats, and incitement. Second, political leaders, we, must set the tone. Words matter. If we tolerate demonization, we should not be surprised when extremism follows. Democracy is strongest when courage defeats fear and respect defeats hatred. Let us defend democratic debate without accepting abuse. Let us ensure that future generations inherit politics shaped by ideas, not intimidation. Thank you very much.
Merci. La parole est à Madame Britt Hubret du CPA.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. First of all, our group would like to congratulate our Vice President, Ms. Gardini, for an excellent and balanced report. Now, violence against all people is wrong, and therefore violence against all politicians is wrong as well. And we rightly speak here about violence against politicians as a threat to democracy. But if that outrage is selective, then we are undermining that very democracy ourselves. Because too often I see that the reaction depends on who the victim is. When someone from the far left is attacked, the outrage is loud, and rightly so. But when conservative, traditional, or right-wing voices are targeted, then it often remains strikingly silent. Or when Charlie Kirk was murdered, some people were even celebrating. And where was a broad outrage after the cowardly murder of a right-wing student, Quentin de Ronquin, in France? And where is the outrage when people with different ideas are attacked by far-left groups or the Hammer Gang? It remains too quiet. And it is not some distant problem. I see it in my own country, in Flanders. Colleagues of my party, sometimes they have to inform the police where and when they arrive at a speaking event, because their safety is not to be guaranteed, simply because they express their opinions and the left apparently can cope with it. Or a recent demonstration, like-minded people of me were attacked with glass bottles. And let us be honest, these are just a few examples, and I can say with near certainty that almost every colleague in my group has experienced something similar. And again, the reaction often remains suspiciously silent. But when I express my opinion, when I defend my ideas, for example, on migration, on von der Leyen, then those previously silent voices suddenly become very loud. Colleagues, I conclude, democracy only works if it applies to everyone, not only to those we like, not only to those we think like us. And honestly, if any of you were attacked because of your beliefs, I will stand by your side. Without hesitation, I will defend your rights, because violence against a politician is always an attack on democracy. The only question is, will you do the same for me? Will you do the same for any of my colleagues? Because if the answer is no, or even maybe, then we are not defending principles here, then we are simply choosing sides. And let's be honest about that. The real enemies of democracy are not those with a different opinion, but those who try to silence other opinions through intimidation, through a cordon, or through violence. And I know on which side I'm on, and I hope you do too.
Merci. La parole est à Madame Lucia Plavakova du groupe ALDE.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues, dear friends. I would like to speak about my experience, but this is not only about me. What I have gone through is shared by many other politicians, especially women and queer politicians. I am choosing to speak in personal terms, not just to make a general point, but to show what we are actually facing in reality. As a female queer politician advocating for the rights of women and LGBTI people, this is what I have experienced in just 2 past years. I was expelled from a parliamentary session while presenting a legislative proposal simply because I had a rainbow sticker on my notebook. During a press conference, another member of the parliament called me a bitch and said he did not consider me to be a woman. After that, I have received thousands of hate messages and death threats, not only to myself, but also to my daughter. She was 6 years at that time. I had to be placed under the state security protection. Because of a disinformation campaign about 72 sexes used as a political tool against my party, I am being misgendered and questioned about my identity on a daily basis. Because my daughter has 2 mothers, I am attacked as a parent, with people asking where I got her, or accusing me of destroying her life. And I receive sexually explicit messages every day, not only online, but also as letters to my home address. These attacks and this constant harassment have serious consequences. They affect mental health, family life, well-being. They can also have a chilling effect, paralyzing politicians at work, making them question whether they shall run again, whether they shall ask for re-election. As a result, we are losing committed public representatives, especially those from underrepresented groups, as women and minorities. Violence and hate against politicians are a threat to democracy itself. That is why it is so important that we act. On behalf of our liberal group, I call on all politicians to stop using polarizing, racist, anti-LGBTI narratives, as well as disinformation and prejudices. Because this is where hate and violence in society begin. Let us change the current tone of public debates and lead by example. Thank you very much.
Merci. La parole est à Madame Seville-Esselenc de la GUE.
Thank you, dear Chair. Distinguished colleagues, we, the Unified European Left Group, value this report for its careful, evidence-based approach, which is a significant contribution. However, it contains important gaps that should be addressed. Notably, it doesn't sufficiently reflect that even in some member states, politicians have often been subjected to sustained forms of state violence. If we support the report, we must also criticize and broaden its scope. Political violence is not only societal or driven by non-state actors. It is also produced, enabled, or normalized by state institutions themselves, including through hostile rhetoric. Indeed, those in power, whether in the state or in government, are often the primary source of violence and hate speech directed at politicians. They also contribute to encouraging and reinforcing such tendencies within society. Turkey exemplifies this pattern. Over the past decade, dozens of elected mayors from the Kurdish political movement, represented today by the DEM party, have been removed and replaced by government-appointed trustees, a practice repeatedly criticized by the Council of Europe. MPs were detained, and our former co-chairs, Selahattin Demirtas and Figen Yüksekdağ, imprisoned despite European Court of Human Rights judgments. Nighttime raids and ill treatment were widely reported. Today, this pressure extends to the opposition. Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu faces judicial measures criticized by European institutions. Can Atalay, elected as an MP in 2023, has been kept imprisoned and prevented from taking his seat despite constitutional court rulings in his favor. The report cites older attacks elsewhere, but omits recent incidents in Turkey, including violent assaults in parliament targeting DEM party and other opposition members. The recognition that women politicians are disproportionately targeted is well-founded. However, intersectionality should be addressed more concretely. For example, Kurdish leftist women and LGBTI politicians in Turkey face overlapping pressures, including state action, gender-based harassment, and coordinated online abuse. Democratic debate may be contentious, but combating political violence, whether societal or state-driven, must remain fully consistent with the European Convention on Human Rights. Thank you for your attention.
Merci. Je vais donner maintenant la parole aux orateurs. Et, ah oui, j'oubliais, Madame Mikkonen, Anna Christina, vous avez la parole. Toutes mes excuses.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, chers collègues. La démocratie est mise à mal en Europe d'une manière sans précédent. Les personnes politiques à tous les niveaux de gouvernement et de tous les horizons politiques peuvent être victimes de violences. Candidats, membres de partis, élus et décideurs politiques exerçant une fonction institutionnelle. Leurs proches et collaborateurs sont souvent également touchés, comme nous avons entendu déjà aujourd'hui. Les personnes politiques victimes de violences peuvent se sentir contraintes de modifier leur comportement, de limiter leur participation aux événements publics ou de réduire leur échange avec leurs électeurs. Elles peuvent aussi choisir de autocensurer en évitant d'apporter certains jugés controversés, voire un changeant de position sur certains politiques. Finalement, elles peuvent décider de se retirer de leurs fonctions ou de ne pas se représenter. De même, les personnes qui envisagent de se lancer en politique peuvent être dissuadées par la violence. Cela réduit le pluralisme et la représentativité et nuit la qualité des processus démocratiques. L'intimidation, les menaces en ligne ou hors ligne et autres formes d'agression verbale ou physique peuvent également avoir un impact critique sur le bien-être mental des personnes politiques, réduisant leur capacité à travailler et à servir le public. La violence ne peut être justifiée au nom de la liberté d'expression. L'objectif ultime de ces actes d'intimidation et de violence est motivé par le seul manque de respect et la haine sans aucun but précis. Nous avons besoin d'un enseignement de l'éducation aux médias à tous les niveaux scolaires, des garanties contre la manipulation de contenu et d'une législation reconnaissant les différentes formes de violence contre les personnalités politiques comme des infractions pénales spécifiques. Nous devons faire preuve d'une tolérance zéro face à ces phénomènes, tout en préservant la liberté d'expression ainsi que la diversité et la représentativité des élus. Des mesures urgentes doivent être prises pour prévenir et contre les violences contre les personnalités politiques, car elles alimentent un climat de peur qui dissuade la participation démocratique à la vie politique. Je vous remercie de votre attention.
Merci. Nous abordons la liste des orateurs. La parole est à Madame Estrella.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Dear colleagues, violence and hate speech against politicians are no longer isolated incidents. They are part of a broader climate of polarization amplified by digital platforms and too often tolerated in our political culture. And this violence is not neutral. It disproportionately affects women, young politicians, and those from minority backgrounds. This is not only an attack on individuals. This is an attack on political pluralism. It is an attack on equality. It is an attack on our core values. Colleagues, when a mayor is threatened in one country, when a parliamentarian is harassed in another. This concerns all of us, because the erosion of democratic norms does not stop at national borders. We need stronger cooperation between our states to monitor and combat hate speech, especially online. We need clear rules for digital platforms which cannot continue to profit from outrage while ignoring its real consequences. And we need to ensure that law enforcement and judicial systems are equipped to respond effectively to threats against elected people. But legislation alone is not enough. We must also look at ourselves. Too often, the line between legitimate political criticism and harmful rhetoric becomes blurred. Let us be clear, freedom of expression is a cornerstone of our democracies, but it must not be used as a shield for intimidation, harassment, or incitement to violence. If people are afraid to speak, to stand for election, or to serve their communities, then democracy is already weakened. Thank you very much.
Merci. La parole est à Madame Deborah Bergamini. Merci. La parole est à Madame Thérèse Coffet.
Violence or threat of violence risks politicians acting freely, going about their business freely in both their professional and private lives. I recall within just a few months of becoming elected member, another MP was stabbed in their surgery while meeting constituents. That significantly changed how I acted as an MP in regards to managing open contact with constituents, which brought criticism locally. But the challenge is you never know. That was reinforced by the murder of 2 MPs in 2016 and 2022, the late Joe Cox and Sir David Amess. Also, my last act as a minister was in tackling dangerous dogs, and that led to a number of death threats. And while I didn't think they were credible, I was certainly challenged in person regularly by campaign groups. It is that sort of activity which does put people off becoming politicians, particularly women. I have a number of friends or contacts in my professional life who would be brilliant politicians, and when I've encouraged them to run for election, pretty much all of them do not want to put up with a hostile environment. Now, the hatred and threats, particularly online, are hurtful not just for the politician, but I suggest in particular it's the case for people who work for politicians. They are often the first to see the hate emails, the harmful language, and they often divert or deflect that from the politician to protect them. And while I did think it not necessary to table an amendment to reflect that, I think we should all be mindful of the impact on those who help us in our professional lives too. Now, I do support the amendment to remove hate speech. We do have to be careful that issues of hate speech do not constrain free speech. That said, we as politicians are civic leaders and we need to lead by example. Careless words can get amplified. Constantly accusing opponents of lying can incite hostility and hatred. But challenge in a considered and considerate way should be our course.
Merci. La parole est à Madame Sonia Gazarian.
Honorable Chair, dear colleagues, first of all, I would like to thank Ms. Gardini for presenting this timely and necessary report. Violence, intimidation, and hate speech directed at politicians are not simply personal attacks. They are attacks on representative institutions, on political pluralism, and on a free exchange of ideas that sustains democratic life. When elected representatives are threatened into silence, it's not only a politician who loses their voices, citizens lose their voices as well. In Armenia, politics was heavily demonized and rarely seen as a space for young women. The environment didn't encourage their participation, nor did it suggest that public life was open to a new generation of female voices. It was only after the Velvet Revolution that young women began to actively participate in political processes. bringing with them the energy that democratic institutions needed. Yet the program came with a resistance. I personally faced significant hate speech, both for my age and gender. Much of it was not intended to attack me personally, but to send a wider message for the public. The politics is not a place for young women. I have served now for 7 years in my parliament, and I have learned one very simple but yet effective way to confront it, to speak up openly about it. Silence protects the problem. Honesty began to dismantle it. By addressing those problems publicly, we have helped to clear up a path for new women politicians who, in my view at least, have been targeted less for being women and young. We should also recognize the strategy behind such abuse. It's to make politics appear hostile, exhausting, and undesirable for young generation. Thank you.
Merci. La parole est à Monsieur Georges Foulk.
Mr. President, I welcome this report and this debate, if only because it allows me to agree completely with Therese Coffey, who I usually disagree with quite a lot. In fact, the report of our Electoral Commission in Britain and the John Smith Centre shows that at the last violence has moved from the periphery of politics to the centre. And 70% of candidates at the last election in the United Kingdom said they had experienced violence. 70%. And that is appalling that that should have happened. Because canvassing, they don't want to canvass. And yet canvassing is a central part of our democracy. And as Theresa said, Joe Cox and Sir David Amess were murdered at surgeries. So it's not people on the right or people on the left, it's that both sides are being murdered, the worst thing that can happen. And it was an Islamic extremist in one case and a far-right extremist in the other. And surgeries are so central to our democracy, absolutely important for the link between us and our constituents. And so what are we doing to counter this? In the United Kingdom, the government has got now this operation to try and counteract the effects of this. We are suggesting we have got now 57 coordinators around the country in this operation to encourage and to advise members of parliament and candidates in relation to threats. But I agree with Britt, who said earlier on that violence against the far right and the left is equally bad. I want to ensure that in politics we can win by argument, not by aggression. Thank you.
Merci. La parole est à Monsieur Nikos Tornaritis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, across Europe, politicians are increasingly targeted by intimidation, harassment, hate speech, and even physical violence. This trend is escalating, fueled by the rapid spread of online abuse, deep fakes, and false narratives, often without consequences. The impact is serious. It undermines democratic process and weakens trust in public institutions. This is not just a concern, it is a systematic threat. Condemnation alone is not enough. We must act now. Prevention, public awareness, and effective monitoring mechanisms are essential. Initiatives such as Council of Europe platform or observatory can strengthen protection and accountability. At the same time, we must ensure faster investigations, stronger legal frameworks, and better cooperation among stakeholders. Particular attention must be given to those most targeted, including women, young politicians, and minorities. Violence has no place in democracy. Protecting those who serve in public life is essential to safeguarding free debate, pluralism, and democratic integrity. Democracy must never be intimidated. Thank you very much.
Merci. La parole est à Monsieur Marco Dreosto. Monsieur Marco Dreosto. Il n'est pas là. La parole est à Monsieur Don Twigg.
President, promoting hate and threatening violence against politicians is the norm now in every country in Europe. I first encountered such a threat when I stood for election in Wales 52 years ago. My wife and I had anonymous phone calls from a man threatening to kidnap our baby son. In those days, such actions were very rare. Not so today, when it's commonplace. I have many friends who have endured personal abuse and threats to their families. One female colleague received a text message telling her that her daughter would be kidnapped and gang raped. These threats are anonymized, made by evil cowards who use and abuse social media to make life a misery for so many in public life. So much so that in the United Kingdom, many good and decent people are now very reluctant to stand for public office. Our draft resolution today underpins very clearly the challenge we face. Declaring representative democracy can only be achieved and sustained if candidates are allowed to campaign safely and peacefully. We need legislation to take account of the threats against politicians and to criminalise those who make them. But we as politicians, we have a responsibility too. We must recognise that responsibility and set an example by refraining from using inflammatory language which can lead to hate and violence. Today, I'm thinking of a dear friend, a Jewish friend. Leo Abzi was a member of parliament for 30 years in Britain. And when he retired, he said, I have only one piece of advice for those who follow me. Tolerate everything, tolerate everyone, but never ever tolerate people who are intolerant. Wise words.
Merci. La parole est à Madame Andrea Edergitz-Tallin.
Merci, Mr. President, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Wenn wir heute als Demokratinnen und Demokraten die Faktenlage zur Gewalt als Mittel der politischen Auseinandersetzung betrachten, so ist das Fazit alarmierend. Psychische und physische Gewalt ist nüchtern betrachtet leider ein Bestandteil des politischen Alltags, mit dem besonders wir Politikerinnen, sage ich ganz bewusst, tagtäglich und überall kalkulieren müssen. Wir haben es heute schon gehört, viele von uns sind und waren betroffen. Und vor allem online. Die Attacken passieren plötzlich und sind oft gar nicht erkennbar, warum. So treffen zum Beispiel bei österreichischen Politikerinnen und Regierungsmitgliedern täglich bis zu 500 Hassnachrichten ein, auch sehr viele eben bei uns Abgeordneten. Und manche Absender drohen mit Mord, mit Vergewaltigung und noch viel ärgeren Sachen. Selbstverständlich müssen diese Versuche, Gewalt zu begehen oder zu begünstigen, mit voller rechtsstaatlicher Härte verfolgt werden. Im österreichischen Strafrecht sind mittlerweile auch weniger greifbare Gewaltformen wie Hass im Gesetz gut geregelt. Und hier liegt es an uns Politiker, den Rechtsstaat wirklich ernst zu nehmen und mit Nachdruck die Einhaltung der Gesetze einzufordern, vor allem dort, wo sie uns selber betreffen. Kurz, Politikerinnen und Politiker vor Gewalt zu schützen, ist nicht alleine eine Aufgabe der Justiz, sondern auch eine Aufgabe für die Politik selbst und für die Gesellschaft, natürlich immer unter Einhaltung der Meinungsfreiheit. Und daher finde ich diesen Bericht so wichtig, um Bewusstsein und Öffentlichkeit für dieses Thema zu schaffen. Wir dürfen keine Opfer sein. Wir müssen uns wehren mit allen uns zur Verfügung stehenden Mitteln. Denn Gewalt in jeder Form darf nicht zum Berufsrisiko von uns werden, von uns demokratisch engagierten Menschen. Öffentliches Leben muss angstfrei und befreit sein.
Merci. La parole est à Madame Valentina Grippo. Madame Valentina Grippo. La parole est à Monsieur Murat Kaïd Sanji.
One?
It's here. It's fine.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, I would like to thank the rapporteur for her timely and significant work. It rightly reminds us that violence and hate speech against politicians are not only attacks on individuals, but direct threats on democratic representation itself. When elected representatives are threatened, intimidated, or silenced, democracy loses its voice. As the report rightly underlines, violence and hate speech creates a chilling effect on political participation, weakening pluralism and eroding public trust in institutions. It is especially alarming that women in politics and representatives of minority groups are often disproportionately targeted online and offline. In this regard, we must adopt a principled and resolute response, a response that strengthens protection, ensures effective investigation, and establishes safeguards against threats, blackmail, AI, and deepfake content. At the same time, we must promote freedom of expression while ensuring protection mechanisms apply equally to all political voices, regardless of their political views. Therefore, as politicians, we carry a particular responsibility to lead by example, inflammatory, dehumanizing, and public rhetoric, as well as scapegoating and normalization of hostility, poison democratic life. And in already polarized societies, such language can deepen divisions and ultimately pave the way for extremism. Protecting politicians means protecting democracy, and this responsibility begins with us, dear politicians. Thank you.
Merci. La parole est à Madame Ripsim Grigorian.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Distinguished colleagues, when we discuss violence and hate speech against politicians, we're not discussing the fragility of individual egos. We're discussing the fragility of democracy itself. The report before us is right. When a politician is attacked because of her or his public role, democracy is attacked as well. In Armenia, we know this, not in theory, but in experience. On the night of 9 November 2020, then the Speaker of Parliament, Ararat Mirzoyan, was violently attacked during the post-war riots and seriously injured. In February 2021, an opposition rally in front of our parliament staged a performance titled The Execution of Ceausescu, or Death to Traitors, a grotesque political spectacle that pushed public discourse even further towards dehumanization. On 24 April 2024, at Titerna Kabert, the Armenian Genocide Commemoration Place, Anna Hakopian and the Prime Minister's youngest daughter, then 8 years old, were met with offensive chants. These are not isolated episodes, they are warning signs. And the threat doesn't end in the street, it continues online, relentlessly. In Armenia as elsewhere, women in public life are especially exposed. A 2024 Council of Europe report on Armenia points on significant legal and institutional gaps in responding to digital violence against women. Violence and hate speech poison democracy in numerous ways. First, they radicalize society. Political opponents are no longer seen as competitors, but as enemies. Second, they silence voices. Third, and perhaps most dangerously, they teach citizens, especially the young, that politics is a dirty arena of humiliation, fear, and hatred. The long-term result is not only extremism, it is also apathy. This is why this report matters. We need to understand that the political culture is in which disagreement needs to remain sharp, yet human dignity remains inviolable. Violence has no space in democracy. If we allow hatred to become the language of politics, democracy will eventually forget how to speak at all. Thank you very much.
Merci. La parole est à Madame Victoria Thieblum.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et merci beaucoup les rapporteurs. Take a knife and cut a Sweden Democrat. Those words were inscribed on our party's campaign cabin during the election campaign in 2022. And below, stickers from a political left organization. Violence against politicians is on the rise across Europe and beyond, and it poses a direct threat to the very foundation of our democracy. Let us be clear, when a politician is attacked, it is not only an attack on an individual, it is an attack on democracy itself. And in my own experience as a right-wing politician, much of the hate I have received personally has come from individuals on the political left, both in real life and on social media. Nobody is as openly aggressive as the political left. Representative democracy depends on the ability of candidates to campaign freely and safely, and on elected officials being able to carry out their duties without fear. Yet today, too many politicians at all levels face harassment, threats, and even physical violence. This affects not only them, but also their families and those around them. Such violence creates a climate of fear. It silences voices, discourages participation, and drives capable individuals from public life. Many politicians feel forced to limit their engagement, avoid controversial issues, or even step down altogether. The result is a chilling effect on democratic participation, reducing pluralism and weakening the quality of our institutions. The response must be decisive. We need stronger legal frameworks, better protection and support for politicians, and effective investigation and prosecution of all forms of violence. Merci.
Merci. La parole est à Monsieur Emmanuel Fernandez.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Oui, la violence contre les responsables politiques menace la démocratie. Encore faut-il en nommer les causes. La montée de l'extrême droite en France et en Europe s'accompagne d'une banalisation des discours racistes, islamophobes, antisémites, LGBTQI-phobes et misogynes, souvent relayés par certains médias. L'exemple en France de Bali Bakayoko, nouvellement élu maire de Saint-Denis-Pierrefitte, est révélateur. Depuis son élection, il a subi un déferlement de haine raciste avec des propos négrophobes insoutenables, notamment sur la chaîne d'information en continu CNews, qu'il a comparé à un singe ou à un chef de tribu primitive. Il est pris pour cible parce qu'un homme noir à la tête d'une grande ville est insupportable pour l'extrême droite. Ces violences ne sont pas isolées. Elles reflètent un racisme et des discriminations systémiques qui touchent de nombreux élus racisés. Ne pas nommer clairement ces réalités, c'est passer à côté de l'essentiel, la capacité de notre démocratie à être réellement représentative. À Strasbourg même, une candidate, Jamila Hadoum, a été menacée de mort au couteau lors de la récente campagne municipale. Quand des élus issus de minorités sont attaqués, c'est un message d'exclusion qui leur est adressé. Ces violences dissuadent l'engagement et affaiblissent la démocratie. Malheureusement, le rapport présenté aujourd'hui fait abstraction de l'immense responsabilité de l'extrême droite dans les violences. L'approche partiale de la rapporteure se fait particulièrement criante dans le paragraphe qui aborde l'affaire Quentin Derenque. Alors je souhaite ici rétablir les faits. Il s'agissait d'un militant néo-nazi dont les nombreuses publications en ligne faisaient l'apologie du Troisième Reich et de la Shoah. Il est mort manifestement des suites des coups qu'il a reçus, plus d'une heure après la violente bagarre de rue que lui-même et ses acolytes néo-nazis ont provoquée, dans un véritable guet-apens sciemment organisé pour s'en prendre aux militants antifascistes. Ce décès est certes tragique, mais je dénonce fermement le fait que ce rapport présente M. Derenque comme une victime innocente des antifascistes. Alors, Madame la rapporteure, je vous le dis, siamo tutti antifascisti.
La parole est à Monsieur James Maloney.
My first time speaking, I didn't know to turn on the mic. I want to thank the rapporteur for this outstanding report on this very important issue, not just to Canadians, but to politicians around the world and people around the world. The reports contained, or the recommendations contained in that report, go to the heart of the issue and the issues we're grappling with in Canada, just like people in this room are grappling with around the world. But the report talks about protecting politicians. I would like to expand that to the Canadian example because we've acted on some of these recommendations. We have legislation before our Parliament now, the Combating Hate Act, but it not only protects politicians, but it protects our citizens. Because if our citizens are living in fear of hate, they will not want to become politicians. So it is not just about us, it is about our communities as well. And that's what I would like to focus on. And this bill before our Parliament, I think, strikes a balance between stopping hate-motivated behavior, but ensuring that freedom of speech is maintained. Because that balance is delicate but important, and this legislation, in my view, does just that. We protect cultural groups, we protect religious groups, we protect minorities. It allows people to practice their religion, love who they want to love, do what they want to do without fear of hate. And the last thing I want to talk about is the online world, because unless we can control the online environment, we will not be able to stop hate speech. We have seen hate dressed up as populism, and the forum they use most often now is the online world. Social media has become a great tool, but it is also becoming a very dangerous weapon. And unless we can control that weapon, this challenge we're debating today becomes much more difficult. Thank you.
Merci. La parole est à Madame Biljana Pantic-Pilja.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to congratulate the rapporteur of the excellent work. In the era of new technologies, hate speech and violence directed at politicians have unfortunately become part of everyday life. Although legal frameworks exist to regulate this issue, we often face a serious challenge. Whenever someone is arrested for making threats online, various activities and non-government organizations invoke the principle of freedom of speech. I came from Serbia, a country where a prime minister was assassinated and where today similar threats are being directed at President Aleksandar Vučić. The past year in Serbia has been particularly difficult, as violence and hate speech reached alarming levels. Opposition politicians created something resembling a wheel of fortune on social media. Each morning, they would spin it, and whichever government official it pointed to, they would publish the address where that politician lived with their families. Such a level of hatred and aggression is something new in political life. We even witnessing a reaction from Commissioner Marta Kos, who warned that publishing and visiting the private address of political opponents is unacceptable. At the same time, politicians from the ruling side were targeted online in a campaign described as making them known, accompanied by calls for members of the ruling party to be chased through the streets and for their homes and facades to be marked with paint. Such practice evoked disturbing historical parallels not seen since World War II, when similar methods were used to mark Jewish homes under Nazi rule. All of this is a direct consequence of hate speech that has spread and overtaken the public space.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Kakakan, you have the floor.
Monsieur le Président, chers collègues,
Il est absolument nécessaire d'interdire les discours de haine en politique, car le moment qu'un discours de haine est utilisé, il impose une hiérarchie. Il contraint la personne visée à se défendre ou bien à défendre les autres, au lieu d'exprimer ses propres idées. Même si cette personne parvient très bien à repousser le discours de haine, elle se trouve empêchée de faire son travail. Ainsi, même si le discours de haine n'incite pas directement au racisme ou bien à la violence, par le sentiment qu'il cause à la personne visée et par l'imposition d'une hiérarchie injuste de pouvoir de cet environnement, il constitue en soi l'ennemi principal de la démocratie. Nous constatons que les femmes et les jeunes personnalités politiques sont particulièrement exposées au discours de haine. Je vais donner un exemple. Une jeune mère, Gülşah Turbay, avait subi une opération médicale. Des rumeurs ont été lancées à son sujet. Qu'elle était en relation avec le chef de son parti et qu'elle avait avorté. En réalité, Gülşah avait été opérée d'un cancer du côlon. Sa sœur était enceinte et elle avait voulu cacher sa maladie pendant un certain temps pour ne pas l'inquiéter. Mais ceux qui prenaient Gülşah pour cible ne se sont pas arrêtés et ont ajouté de nouvelles histoires à leurs mensonges. Gülşah lisait ces mensonges chaque jour. Puis elle est apparue publiquement et a expliqué la situation et a poursuivi tous ces menteurs en justice. Et elle a commencé à gagner ses procès. Les jeunes filles et les femmes politiques qui ont vu sa force l'ont prise pour modèle. Mais Gülşah est décédée à cause de cette maladie. Elle n'est plus parmi nous aujourd'hui. Ceux qui ont lancé des mensonges à son sujet sont toujours en vie et continuent de choisir de nouvelles jeunes femmes pour cible. Est-ce que nous voulons que le monde soit ainsi, que la politique soit un tel espace? Ou voulons-nous établir certains principes éthiques et tracer certaines limites?
Thank you. Sir Edward Lee, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to start by paying tribute to my murdered friend, David Amis. His only crime was to attend a surgery to look after his own constituents, and he was stabbed to death by an Islamist extremist. He'd made no criticism of Islam. He spent most of his political career actually defending the rights of animals. And for that crime, he was murdered ruthlessly and horribly. So this is an important debate, and we should call out hatred wherever it's found. It gives me an opportunity to congratulate my socialist friends, Lord Fuchs and Don Tuig, on what they said, and Therese Coffey, and I agree with everything they say, that we should be tolerant of everybody and simply intolerant of intolerance. But I also want to congratulate my colleague, Ms. Hoebrechts from Belgium. She gave a very powerful and very brave speech. Every time when you're on the right, you try and speak up for what you believe in. You are trolled, abused. I mean, frankly, I feel it's my duty sometimes to put these meanderings on social media, but such is the abuse, I don't bother to read the replies anymore, and I live happily for that. But she's quite right, what my colleague says, that we on the right have a right to stand up for our Judeo-Christian heritage, that that's not anything against Islam. It's the fundamental nature of Europe and progress in Europe and tolerance. We on the right have a right to stand up against mass migration, which is undermining the social compact of our nations. That's not racist in any way. We on the right have a right to say that government has no money of its own, and when government says we're spending this, we're doing this, they're spending your money. So I will defend the right of the left here to say whatever they like, as long as they defend the right of me on the right to say what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Eric Heiss, you have 2 minutes.
Besten Dank, Herr Präsident, geschätzter Europarat. Körperliche Gewalt, Gewaltaufrufe, Beleidigungen, Ehrbeleidigungen und Bedrohungen gehen gar nicht. Nicht nur in der Politik nicht, überall geht das nicht. Aber ich glaube, in allen europäischen Ländern sind diese Delikte unter Strafe. Ich denke nicht, dass dieses Papier etwas bringt, das verhindert werden kann, dass solche Delikte verhindert werden können. Ich gehe eher davon aus, wir müssen das Problem an der Wurzel packen. Wo entsteht der Groll der Bürgerinnen und Bürger, die zu solchen Sachen neigen? Ich denke vielleicht, wir müssten unser demokratisches System überdenken. Das heißt, müssten wir allenfalls den Mitbürgerinnen und Mitbürgern nicht mehr Mitsprache erlauben, dass kein Groll im Magen bei ihnen entsteht. Es kann zum Beispiel sein, wie das Beispiel der Schweiz, eine direkte Demokratie, wo die Bürgerinnen und Bürger nicht nur alle 4 Jahre einmal abstimmen und wählen können. Sie können sich mehrere Mal im Jahr äußern zu politisch inhaltlichen Themen und so entsteht kein Groll im Magen. Wir dürfen aber nicht die Meinungsäußerungsfreiheit noch weiter einschränken. Sie wurde schon sehr weit eingeschränkt, dass man nicht mal mehr mit gutem Gewissen irgendetwas gegen gewisse Gruppierungen sagen kann oder darf, dass man nicht schon fast Angst haben muss, man sei ein Verbrecher. Besten Dank für die.
Thank you. Mr. Alexander Mirkovic, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Hate speech is something that probably exists in every country, but nowhere has it become normalized simply because it is directed against those in power. There is not a single person from my party who is in the past 16 months has not been subject to digital, verbal or physical violence. They have tried to burn us alive, shoot at us, attack our families and set our offices on fire, all in effort to forcibly overthrow elected government. This level of continuous violence, which we endure day after day, has not been recorded anywhere else in the world. It's fueled precisely by hate speech and blatant lies. By far, the most dangerous and disturbing situation concerns President Alexander Vučić and his family, who are being dehumanized on a daily basis, while calls for their murder have become commonplace, something that's entirely unacceptable. Television programs openly discuss about his parents, brother, even his children, with explicit calls for their murder. In some countries, even a fraction of what the authorities in Serbia are subject to would result in people being brutally beaten, arrested and sentenced to the prison. And then, nobody talks about the freedom of speech. When we talk about freedom of speech, the main question is, where is the dividing line between freedom of speech and hate speech? When it comes to attacks on my colleagues and President Alexander Vučić, that line has clearly been crossed 10 years ago, especially in the last year. That is why we strongly support this report, and I am particularly encouraged by the call to tighten legislation in our countries, so that this toxic hatred and politically motivated violence can be brought to the end, and those who are responsible for that be properly punished. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Becerra Kostanowska-Tsoeska, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you first and foremost to the rapporteur for this report that, in my opinion, is one of the most important here, not just for us, but also for our societies. Today, with social media, we have become, as politicians, very easy targets. And if you open any of your Facebook, Instagram, or any other social post that you have made, even today, the most widely used words would be prison, corrupt, traitor, stupid, and I don't think I'm even allowed to say the words that are being used for women. Politicians today endure as much as verbal harassment, intimidation, sexual abuse, undermining their professionalism. They go through the immense levels of public scrutiny. Usually their employers are not happy that they are into politics, and women in politics are usually, according to the public, immoral, and they don't follow principles. Even though 10 years ago when I entered politics, one very prominent politician told me that it comes with the job and you have to get used to it and you have to give it 3 days. There was a recent event almost a year ago when an Instagram profile published every single step me and my family did. When I went to the prosecutor's office, they said they do not have the proper legislation that they can solve it. After me, the Prime Minister got a threat through the same profile, and the case was solved 3 days afterwards. So I really do not care if someone is left or right, because violence is violence, and we have to address it in any form, because it's taking a huge toll on us, on our families, on our societies, and on our work. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sita Kurmai, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Elisabetta. Your report could not be more timely. In Europe today, violence against politicians is no longer a tragic exception. It has become a pattern. A social democratic candidate was beaten in Dresden, a senator struck from behind in Berlin, a prime minister assaulted in a Copenhagen square, and more than 50 candidates physically attacked in a single French campaign. And it is a pattern that targets, above all, women. Research shows that 85% of women MPs have suffered psychological violence in the exercise of their mandate. Nearly 1 in 2 have received threats of death, of rape, of beating, threats that increasingly extend to their children. Dear colleagues, let me be clear. No feminism, no democracy. When a woman is driven out of a public life by rape threats on social media, by deepfakes stripping her on her dignity, by orchestrated campaigns of misogyny, it is not only her voice that is silent. It is the voice of every of us. Our pluralism is diminished. It is our democracy that is mutilated. Grevio was right. It is the first general recommendation to name the digital dimension of violence against women for what it is and continuum. The line between an enormous troll and an assassin is thinner than we like to pretend. Just like in the case of Joe Cox, the trigger was pulled by a man who had first been radicalized on our platform in our silence. We have the tools. We have a recommendation on combating hate speech. In the EU, we have the Digital Service Act. We have the directive on criminalizing deepfake on cyber violence. We have a European democracy shield. What we lack too often is the political courage to use them and honestly to acknowledge that 6 member states of the EU, including my own, have still not ratified the Istanbul Convention. Dear colleagues, an attack on any politician, women or man, left or right, the mayor of a village or a head of a government, it is an attack on democracy itself. If we owe to our colleagues who have been injured, to our sisters driven from offices, and to the citizens who send us here to speak more loudly, to legislate more firmly, and to act together, the fight is not over yet. There is no time to lose. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir Christopher Chope, you have 2 minutes.
United Kingdom colleagues, I wish to bring some historical context to this important debate. As a newly elected MP in 1984, I was at the Grand Hotel in Brighton when the Irish Republican Army blew up the hotel, attempting to murder our Prime Minister, but instead killing my parliamentary colleague, Tony Berry. The IRA also murdered 3 other MPs. When I started out in politics in the 1970s, threats and violence from left-wing trade unionists were commonplace. But we were not intimidated and carried on. And I think that should be the message we send out from this assembly today. Politicians should not be wimps. They should persevere and carry on. Pluralism is fundamental to democracy. And that includes defending the right of people to speak, irrespective of whether you agree with them or not. And that is why we must call out what is essentially the Orwellian trend in the European Parliament to treat some politicians as more equal than others. That is why rereading Animal Farm is, I think, essential for us all. And then we will understand that we must denounce those political parties represented in this hemicycle who support cordon sanitaire against politicians with whom they disagree. To support a cordon sanitaire is to be an enemy of democracy. And that's why I'm also very in favour of the amendment to remove hate speech, because hate speech is used by opponents of democracy and free speech as a means of trying to control the views and expressions of others.
Thank you, Ms. Maria Netheli Tsatsianidou. You have 2 minutes.
I speak today as a young representative from Greece, a country that, like many others, is experiencing the growing pressure of toxicity in public life. Violence and hate speech against politicians are becoming normalized. And in today's digital era, this normalization spreads faster, deeper, and more aggressively than ever before. Social media has transformed political communication. It has given voice to many, but it has also amplified anger, misinformation, and dehumanization at an unprecedented scale. A lie can now travel across countries in minutes, and a coordinated attack can destroy reputations overnight. And sometimes the consequences are not just political, they're also human. Just last week in Greece, after a wave of fake news and online attacks, the deputy minister to the prime minister suffered a ruptured aneurysm, and he is now in critical condition. And although we cannot reduce such a medical event to a single cause, we cannot ignore the environment we are collectively creating, because this is our new reality. Intensity without pause, exposure without protection, and judgment without responsibility. Dear colleagues, when politicians are constantly under attack, democracy itself weakened. People withdraw, they self-censor, and many decide not to enter public life. So we must act, because this is the real danger. Not only the attacks we see, but the voices we do not hear. And equally, we must change our own behavior, because words matter, tones matter. We must reject hate even when it targets our opponents, especially them. Protecting politicians is not a matter of privilege. It is a matter of preserving the integrity of our democratic institutions, because we know very well that democracy cannot survive in an atmosphere of fear. Thank you.
Thank you. Madame Louise Morel, you have 2 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Mes chers collègues, attaquer un élu, c'est attaquer la démocratie elle-même. Ce n'est pas une formule rhétorique, c'est une réalité que nous documentons, que nous subissons pour beaucoup d'entre nous et que ce rapport nous oblige enfin à traiter avec la gravité qu'elle mérite. Les faits sont là. En France, un rapport du Centre d'analyse et de lutte contre les atteintes aux élus, publié en mai 2025, recense 2501 faits de violence ou d'incivilité contre les élus en 2024, soit entre 30 et 40 par semaine, dont 250 agressions physiques. Il y a eu une légère baisse de 9% par rapport à 2023. Cela pourrait sembler rassurant, ça ne l'est pas. Ce niveau reste structurellement préoccupant et les élections municipales de mars 2026 qui viennent de s'achever l'ont confirmé. La campagne a été marquée par une recrudescence des intimidations, des actes d'hostilité envers les candidats, y compris dans des communes où la vie politique locale était jusqu'alors apaisée. Ce phénomène n'a rien de spontané, il s'inscrit dans un phénomène de défiance croissante envers nos institutions, nourrie par une polarisation que les réseaux sociaux amplifient chaque jour. Et puis il y a cette rhétorique de plus en plus violente qui finit à force d'être répétée par banaliser la haine dans le débat public. Quand des élus en viennent à s'auto-censurer, quand des candidats renoncent à s'engager par crainte, ce n'est pas seulement inquiétant, c'est le pluralisme démocratique qui recule. Ce phénomène ne connaît pas de frontières. En Allemagne, en Espagne, en Italie, les mêmes violences, les mêmes intimidations. Et derrière ces actes, il y a une logique à l'œuvre, celle qui consiste à saper la confiance des citoyens en leurs représentants, à leur faire croire que ceux-ci ne mériteraient ni respect ni protection. Cette logique, nous devons la rejeter avec force, avec des lois fortes, des enquêtes rapides et efficaces. Il nous faut une régulation du numérique à la hauteur, qui protège la liberté d'expression, mais qui ne laisse plus prospérer les discours qui déshumanisent, parce que la force du débat démocratique ne se mesure pas à la violence des attaques, mais à la qualité des arguments. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. Mr. Nuno Facenda, you have 2 minutes.
President, dear colleagues, violence and hate speech against politicians are not isolated acts. They are increasing across Europe and represent a serious threat to democracy. We must be clear. This agreement is not legitimate, it is essential to democracy. But violence and hate speech are not political expression. They are attacks on democracy. Democracy depends on free debate and participation. Violence has no place in it. Representative democracy depends on freedom, the freedom to campaign, to speak, and to serve without fear. Yet today, too many candidates, politicians, and public figures face threats, intimidation, and hate speech, both online and offline. And too often their families are targeted as well. This is amplified online. What starts as a comment can quickly become a coordinated campaign. And behind every screen, there is a real impact on real people. This violence is not neutral. Hate speech, misogyny, and racism are being normalized in public discourse. This creates a chilling effect. It discourages capable individuals from entering public life and narrows the diversity of voices in our institutions. The result is clear: less pluralism, less representation, and weaker democracy. So what must we do? We need zero tolerance for violence. We need accountability, especially online. And we need a political culture based on respect and responsibility. Political leaders must lead by example. Words matter, tone matters, responsibility matters. If we normalize hate speech, we normalize those who reject a democracy based on freedom and respect. Europe must stand firm with full commitment to democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Elvira Kovacs, you have 2 minutes.
Distinguished Chair, dear colleagues, for years there has been an ongoing heated global debate over the precise boundaries between free speech, discrimination and hate speech. If we think of democracy as being built on the twin pillars of majority rule and minority rights, or to put it another way, freedom and equality, they have tended to be better for freedom than... We have failed to emphasize the importance of equal rights. We have neglected the idea of reciprocity, which should be central, where my freedom depends on your freedom, even if we disagree. I believe that without freedom from hate, there can be no true freedom of speech. In the Western Balkans, hateful narratives are particularly dangerous because of their substantial potential to increase the existing tensions between communities and negatively affect the trust-building process, as well as genuine recovery of the whole society from the past conflicts. The ECRI report on Serbia recommends that the authorities step up their efforts in encouraging public figures, in particular high-level officials, politicians, to refrain from using racist and other forms of hate speech themselves, to firmly and promptly condemn the use of hate speech by others, to use counter-speech and alternative speech, etc. On the other hand, for example, the most common hate narratives used on political opponents in the Western Balkans were that they are enemies of the state, enemies of the people, foreign hired soldiers, dangerous and corrupt. These narratives fuel one another's rhetoric or actions, leading to growth in radicalization on both sides of this division. I believe that a more empirical research on hate speech in the Western Balkans will enable better understanding of factors and actors that lead to hate speech in different spheres of society, sensitize the professional community and the public, and help signal potential security threats and escalation. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bianca Eugenia Gavrila, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. President, dear colleagues, first of all, I would like to thank Mrs. Giardini for her excellent report. I speak today not only as an elected representative, but as a voice from a young political movement in my country, the Party of Young People in Romania. And I want to share with you what last year has felt like for us. We are a party of ordinary citizens, entrepreneurs, teachers, craftspersons, drivers, young parents, people who had never been in politics before, but who stepped forward because they believed their country was drifting away from them. And from the very first day, we were not debated. We were labeled. We were not contradicted. We were dismissed. Our voters were called ignorant. Our members were called extremists. Our MEPs were called agents of the foreign powers. Our young activists received abuse online that no young person should ever have to read. Some of our members have stopped going to public events. Some have quietly stepped back, not because they lost the argument, but because they lost the energy to keep defending the simple right to hold a different opinion. I do not stand here today to ask for pity. I stand here to tell you something more important. This is not only our story. The same is happening across this assembly, across this continent. Violence and hatred do not choose a political color. They choose whoever dares to say something uncomfortable. So yes, I support this report. Yes, I condemn violence against every single politician in this room, regardless of party, regardless of country, regardless of whether we agree. But colleagues, let us remember this. Citizens turn to anger when they feel nobody is listening. The answer to hatred is not silence. It is to hear them before the anger becomes violence. Thank you.
Thank you. Madame Gabrielle Casala, you have 2 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je profite de cette intervention pour répondre à Madame la députée de Suède qui s'est exprimée tout à l'heure en disant que la violence venait exclusivement de la gauche. Je l'invite à regarder les statistiques de l'Union européenne ou ce qui se passe en France. Parce que ce qu'on voit en France, c'est qu'en 40 ans, l'extrême droite a tué 10 fois plus de personnes que la dite ultra-gauche. Ce qu'on voit, c'est que depuis 1986, l'extrême droite a tué dans le pays où nous nous trouvons 64 personnes pour des motifs racistes, islamophobes, antisémites, nationalistes. Rien que depuis 2022, notre pays a connu la mort de M. Hichem Miraoui, de M. Jamel Benjabala, de M. Federico Martin Aramburu, de 3 militantes kurdes et toutes ces personnes ont été tuées pour des mobiles d'extrême droite. S'il y a d'ailleurs des collègues du Rassemblement national dans cet hémicycle, ils devraient regarder aussi dans quel dossier ils sont mis en cause, puisque le Rassemblement national est le seul parti en France où des personnes qui ont été candidates à des élections ou qui ont exercé des responsabilités au sein de ce parti ont été soit condamnées, soit mises en cause et en attente de procès pour des motifs terroristes. On parle de 9 personnes adhérentes au Rassemblement national. Et je vous renvoie aussi à la déclaration de M. Chenu, le vice-président de l'Assemblée nationale, membre du Rassemblement national, qui a dit de M. de Rank qui était un admirateur de l'Allemagne nazie et dont on a retrouvé les milliers de tweets antisémites, racistes, négrophobes en ligne. M. Chenu a dit « il était l'un des nôtres, il était de notre tribu » et lorsque tous ces messages ont été découverts, eh bien, il ne s'est à aucun moment excusé. Alors s'il y a une violence, c'est celle de l'extrême droite et il n'y a que l'extrême droite qui tue dans ce pays.
Thank you. Ms. Meule Latifa Martinez Simón, you have 2 minutes.
Es un honor dirigirme a este órgano parlamentario que representa una de las tradiciones más sólidas en la defensa de la democracia, de los derechos humanos y del Estado de Derecho. En el marco del debate sobre la protección de la democracia, hoy desde distintas latitudes enfrentamos un desafío común: la erosión gradual de las instituciones democráticas. En diversas regiones del mundo, incluidas América Latina, se observan patrones preocupantes: el debilitamiento de los contrapesos institucionales, la subordinación del poder judicial, la intervención del poder en los sistemas electorales, la concentración política que diluye los límites del ejercicio democrático y la deslegitimación sistemática de la crítica proveniente de la oposición, la prensa y la sociedad civil. Estos fenómenos fracturan el equilibrio indispensable para toda democracia. Y México no es ajeno a esta realidad. En la modernización del Acuerdo Global México-Unión Europea, que concluyó el año pasado, se establece un marco ambicioso y moderno para ampliar las relaciones políticas, de cooperación, comerciales y de inversión. Esta cooperación internacional está ligada al respeto del Estado de Derecho, los derechos humanos y de la democracia. Sin embargo, estos compromisos hoy enfrentan serios cuestionamientos, ya que en los últimos años en México se ha consolidado una preocupante concentración del poder. Los contrapesos constitucionales se han eliminado o han sido sometidos al Ejecutivo. Por primera vez el Poder Judicial se renovó bajo un control total del gobierno a través del voto popular, con listas previamente distribuidas en su base clientelar, logrando imponer a sus ministros en la Suprema Corte, a sus magistrados y jueces con apenas el 10% de la participación electoral. Todo esto ocurre en una grave crisis de inseguridad. Han asesinado en 2024-2025 10 alcaldes y hay 14,000 desaparecidos. Hago un firme y respetuoso llamado a que esta honorable asamblea observe lo que está pasando en México. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Fru Kolbrún Áslaugar Baldursdóttir, you have 2 minutes.
Mr. President, I would like to thank the rapporteur for this important report. Violence against politicians is rising, and it is not limited to the internet. It occurs both online and offline, ranging from harassment and threats to physical attacks and even killings. While social media has amplified this problem, we must not reduce it to a digital issue. It is a broader challenge linked to polarization, mistrust, and the erosion of respect in political life. At the same time, we must be clear, strong political disagreement is part of democracy, but violence, threats, and dehumanizing language are not. What is most concerning is the impact. Violence creates fear. It discourages people from entering politics. It pushes others to withdraw or self-censor. In doing so, it weakens democratic participation and representation. So what is the response? Security measures are necessary, but they are not sufficient. We need a broader approach, stronger legal frameworks, effective enforcement, responsible media environments, and better protection against online abuse. But we also need to go further. We must invest in civic education, strengthen trust in institutions, and promote a political culture based on respect and responsibility. And we, as politicians, must lead by example. We must reject inflammatory rhetoric and clearly condemn violence in all its forms. Because this is not only about the safety of politicians, it is about the health of our democracies. Thank you.
Thank you. Madame Peters Trescorolfo, you have 2 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Chers collègues, le projet de rapport le souligne, nous ne sommes plus confrontés à de simples rumeurs, mais à des architectures de désinformation. Lorsque des millions de citoyens sont exposés à des contenus haineux, affirmant contre toute réalité qu'une première dame serait née sous une autre identité ou que des dirigeants seraient autre chose que des êtres humains, nous franchissons un seuil critique. Ces informations ne visent pas à convaincre, elles visent à déstabiliser, à ridiculiser et, in fine, à délégitimer. Ces campagnes suivent des schémas désormais bien identifiés. Les travaux académiques montrent d'ailleurs que des réseaux automatisés par des bots amplifie ces contenus. La rumeur prépare le terrain, le doxing exécute la pression. À partir du moment où un responsable politique ou sa famille devient une cible personnelle, l'objectif n'est plus le débat démocratique, c'est l'intimidation. En tant que femme parlementaire, permettez-moi de souligner que les femmes candidates ne sont pas attaquées comme leurs homologues masculins. Elles sont sexualisées, menacées, exposées dans leur intimité. Les candidats LGBTI, eux, sont souvent ciblés par des pratiques d'outing et de divulgation d'informations personnelles qui les exposent à des risques physiques réels. Dans ces cas, le doxing devient une arme, non plus pour les discréditer, mais pour localiser, désigner et parfois inciter à la violence. Le doxing est une porte que l'on force. C'est une adresse jetée en pâture, comme une cible, un nom d'enfant exposé, une vie privée arrachée à l'intimité pour être livrée à la foule numérique. En quelques clics, le désaccord politique se transforme en traque et l'espace public déborde jusque sur le pas de la porte. Nous devons donc traiter ces phénomènes pour ce qu'ils sont réellement, non pas des excès de liberté d'expression, mais des atteintes opérationnelles à l'intégrité démocratique. Lorsqu'elle s'installe dans le débat public, ce n'est pas seulement la sécurité des élus qui est en jeu, c'est la capacité même de gouverner qui se trouve progressivement sapée. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. Mr. Rostislav Tistek, you have 2 minutes.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, for Ukraine, this issue is not a theoretical. We are living in the conditions of war where the Russian Federation uses not only missiles and tanks, but also terror, political assassinations, hate-driven information campaigns, and attempts to physically eliminate political leaders. Recently, Ukraine was shaken by the assassination of Andriy Poruby, former chairman of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine and member of Ukrainian parliament. The investigation established that the perpetrator had been recruited by the Russian intelligence services long before the attack and acted under their coordination. This is not just a crime, it is an example of how an authoritarian state uses political violence as a tool of war against democracy. Another example, tragic, was the murder of Irina Farion, a Ukrainian linguist, public figure, and former member of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. She was a prominent representative of the Ukrainian national movement and strongly advocated for the Ukrainian language, national identity, and democratic values. According to the investigation, the motive for this crime is believed to be hatred and national intolerance related to her public stance. Of course, you know about numerous attempts to assassinate the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. This represents a new type of threat for Europe, when political leaders are physically targeted, when hate campaigned and launched against them, when the violence becomes an instrument of politics. Democracy itself comes under direct attack. We must say clearly, political violence, hate speech and intimidation campaigns cannot be part of democratic politics. The international community must act together to confront the threat. Because by defending democracy in Ukraine, we are defending democracy in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you. Lord Leslie Griffiths, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, President, and colleagues. It's good to be here. I'm the rare member of this Assembly who has never had a death or harmful threat of any kind at all, and it has been important for me to hear the pain that's been reported, the personal experiences that the people have undergone, and the widespread nature of the harm being done by irresponsible speech and the anonymized threats that come via the internet. So I'm very glad I've heard what I've heard, but I can't add to it, except to say that I sought some advice from the Joe Cox Foundation. We're coming up to the 10th anniversary of Joe's death, a violent death, and it doesn't need to be said which side of the spectrum effected that dreadful thing. It happened, and the fact that it happened is what we register. The report that I got from the Joe Cox Foundation gives us all the statistical stuff that I've been listening to this morning, the widespread nature of abuse. But it also sets out progress that has been registered, and I think perhaps that note needs to be struck too. The United Kingdom's cross-government Defending Democracy Task Force coordinating responses across government departments, the police with improved resources, safety spending is now exempt from election spending limits. The Electoral Commission has improved its guidance to candidates and is currently planning a deep-fake scanning tool. The devolved administrations in England, Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland have their own measures underway, and political parties are encouraged to take more action to improve the way they behave themselves in their public lives. So perhaps that note needs to be part of the way we respond to this excellent report.
Thank you. Ms. Natalya Lakovic, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, today we are not only talking about politicians, we are talking about the state of democracy. Violence and hate speech against politicians are not longer rare. They are becoming normal, and that is serious warning. When politicians receive threats, when they are insulted or attacked, they start to stay silent. They avoid important topics, they withdraw from public life. And when politicians are silent, democracy becomes weaker. Women and minorities are especially targeted. They face more attacks, more pressure, and more personal abuse. This sends a dangerous message that politics is not for everyone, and a democracy without diversity is not a really democracy. Social media has made this problem even worse. Hate spreads fast, often anonymously without consequences. And the most dangerous part is this: hate is slowly becoming accepted as normal, but it is not. Violence is not the option. Threats are not freedom of speech. Hate is not democracy. If we allow politicians to work in fear, then we allow fear to lead. That is why our responsibility is clear. We must protect politicians. We must protect public space. We must restore a culture of dialogue. And most important, we must send a clear message. In political, disagreement is normal. Criticism is necessary, but hate and violence must never be accepted. Because when we protect politicians, we protect democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Jurgita Sukoventje, you have 2 minutes.
Monsieur le Président, chers collègues, je prends la parole aujourd'hui concernant la résolution consacrée à la violence et au discours de haine vis-à-vis des politiques. On soutient pleinement ce projet de résolution. Le texte répond à une réalité préoccupante qui touche l'ensemble de nos démocraties. Le rapport souligne clairement que la violence et les discours de haine à l'encontre des responsables politiques constituent une menace existentielle pour la démocratie. Il ne s'agit pas seulement d'attaques contre les individus, mais d'atteintes directes au fonctionnement de nos institutions et à la participation démocratique. Aujourd'hui, de nombreux élus, tant au niveau local que national, sont confrontés à des menaces, à du harcèlement en ligne et des campagnes de désinformation. Ces attaques entraînent des conséquences graves. Autocensure, renforcement à exercer un mandat et perte de confiance des citoyens envers les institutions démocratiques. Nous devons également reconnaître que certaines catégories sont particulièrement vulnérables. Les femmes en politique, ainsi que les représentants des minorités, sont exposés de manière disproportionnée à ces formes de violence. Cela affaiblit la représentation politique et nuit la diversité essentielle à toute démocratie. De plus, ces phénomènes ne relèvent pas uniquement de dynamiques internes. Ils peuvent aussi être instrumentalisés dans le cadre ingénieur extérieur et de stratégies hybrides visant à déstabiliser nos sociétés démocratiques. Pour toutes ces raisons, la Lituanie soutient cette résolution. Elle constitue une étape importante pour renforcer la protection des politiques, garantir la liberté d'expression véritable et préserver l'intégrité de nos démocraties. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. Mr. Malte Kaufmann, you have 2 minutes.
Ja, Herr Vorsitzender, meine Damen und Herren, vielen Dank für diese Debatte. Ich glaube, sie ist wichtig und sie zeigt eben, dass Politiker aller möglichen verschiedenen Parteien betroffen sind. Wir haben einige erschreckende Beispiele gehört. Meine Partei, die AfD, ist auch besonders betroffen von politischer Gewalt. Bei uns werden Parteistände angegriffen. Der nächste Parteitag im Juni in Erfurt soll verhindert werden von der Antifa. Die kommen da mit Tausenden auf die Straße. Es gibt oft verletzte Polizisten bei diesen Aktionen. Ich selber habe es auch schon erlebt, als ich mal Oberbürgermeisterkandidat war in Stuttgart, dass ich trotz Personenschützern angegriffen wurde von Linksextremisten. Einer hat es geschafft, mir von hinten auf den Kopf zu schlagen. Aber nicht nur solche Gewaltdelikte passieren, es gibt auch unterschwelligere Sachen, wie zum Beispiel, dass Parteimitglieder von uns das Konto gekündigt wird oder dass Hotels storniert werden oder dass Parteimitglieder sogar ausgeschlossen werden von Vereinen. Das sind alles sehr ungute Entwicklungen und wir müssen mit gutem Beispiel vorangehen. Und deswegen hilft es gar nicht, wenn wir in der Debatte dann so aus dem Blauen heraus Worte benutzen wie Antisemitismus oder Rassismus unterstellt oder Rechtsextremismus oder auch Brandmauern aufbauen. Das sind alles Dinge, die einen Nährboden liefern, der zu Hass und auch zu Gewalt führen kann. Meine Damen und Herren, ich möchte aber noch einen anderen Aspekt aufzeigen. Es sind ja nicht nur Politiker betroffen. In Deutschland zum Beispiel sind zunehmend auch Rettungskräfte, Sanitäter, ja sogar Busfahrer oder Journalisten von Gewalt betroffen. Und deswegen denke ich, wir sollten uns einsetzen für freie Meinungsäußerung. Jeder sollte das Recht haben, die Migrationspolitik zu kritisieren oder Genderideologie oder auch die grüne Transformation, ohne Angst zu haben, Gewalt ausgesetzt zu werden. Vielen herzlichen Dank.
Thank you. My colleague Claude Kern, you have 2 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, mes chers collègues. Je voudrais remercier Elisabetta Gardini pour ce rapport qui aborde un sujet crucial pour la vitalité de nos démocraties. Les observations qu'elle dresse sont plus qu'inquiétantes, tant du point de vue de la gravité des violences commises que leur généralisation et leur banalisation dans toute l'Europe. Je veux en outre souligner que ce phénomène n'épargne aucune démocratie, et ce sont peut-être même les plus anciennes, comme le Royaume-Uni et la France, qui seraient les plus touchées d'après les données de ce rapport. Ceci démontre bien que, malgré l'expérience des années passées, nos régimes ne disposent pas des outils nécessaires pour juguler ces violences. Certes, elles prennent des formes nouvelles et elles tendent à se multiplier sous l'effet de la numérisation avec les cyberharcèlements répétés contre plusieurs élus. Mais les agressions verbales et physiques ne disparaissent pas pour autant, loin s'en faut. Je me réjouis donc que ce rapport et cette résolution proposent des mesures pour y mettre fin, telles que la création d'un observatoire européen de ces violences et l'adoption de lois appropriées. Je veux remercier à cet égard d'avoir cité la loi française de 2024, car il s'agit d'une loi d'initiative sénatoriale que j'avais co-signée et que le Sénat a adoptée à l'unanimité. Notre intention était en effet de renforcer la protection des élus locaux qui sont plus vulnérables et de plus en plus menacés. Alors que notre Sénat représente les collectivités territoriales, nous nous devions d'agir pour préserver les conditions d'exercice de la démocratie locale. Nous avons non seulement durci l'arsenal pénal contre les faits de violence commis contre les élus, mais aussi amélioré leur protection fonctionnelle et renforcé la prise en charge financière et morale des victimes. Nous ne devons pas baisser la garde car les élus locaux, comme nous les partenaires, sommes pris pour cible par des organismes malveillants. Je soutiendrai donc sans réserve la résolution et la recommandation que vous proposez, car face à de telles menaces, nous devons coordonner les efforts de tous nos parlements et nous nourrir des expériences des uns et des autres. Merci.
Thank you. Mr. Ronald Marianne Stroh, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dear colleagues, coming from Romania, where we have recently seen politicians threatened and targeted both online and physically during election campaigns and beyond, I know this is not a distant issue. It is real and it is growing all across Europe. Violence and hate against politicians are increasing and becoming a serious threat to democracy. And when politicians are threatened or pushed out of public life, the pluralism suffers and democracy, of course, cannot function properly. And this is, of course, fueled by disinformation, by online harassment, by deepfakes, which spread lies and divide all the people and also the society. We already see the effects: more aggressive debates, growing polarization, and the loss of the middle ground. And let us be clear, freedom of speech does not mean the right to threaten or spread hate. Europe's history reminds us that ignoring early signs of political violence has never ended well. And we must lower the tone, reject hate, and keep political debate respectful. Democracy depends on people willing to engage and find common ground. We must act now, because Europe cannot accept violence in politics, and we must fully support this resolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Aisu Pankulu, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Distinguished colleagues, we stand at a crossroads where violence against politicians is no longer an isolated incident, but an alarming trend rising across many of our member states. As this report states, violence has no place in a democracy. We are witnessing a chilling effect undermining our representative institutions. When intimidation and dehumanizing rhetoric become the standard tools of political engagement, it is our democratic pluralism that pays the price. Women and minorities are disproportionately targeted, and 85% of female parliamentarians have suffered psychological violence. To our youth and young women, the message we are sending today is a dangerous one. When they see public figures targeted by deepfakes and online harassment, we are not inviting them into the politics. We are warning them that the price of admission is their safety and their sanity. So the polarization treats opponents as enemies. In Turkey, aggressive rhetoric creates fertile ground for hostility. Normalizing violence shatters the fundamental trust citizens place in our institutions. We must meet this crisis with robust legislation, not delegate to algorithms. Colleagues, we are not here just to protect our seats or our personal safety. We are here to safeguard the fundamental right of every citizen to serve without fear or the loss of their human dignity. If we remain silent today, our democracy will be silent tomorrow. We are not here to merely survive the noise. We are here to lead through it. Let us prove that the power of an idea is always greater than the shadow of a threat. Let us reclaim our political spaces and ensure that the voice of the people is ever or never drowned out by the noise of hate. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Madalena Cordero, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. We are living in a time when truth has been trivialized, silenced. We are living in a world where saying that a man is a man and a woman is a woman is considered scandalous, where protecting the life of a baby is labeled extremism, where questioning the power of elites is dismissed as disinformation, where defending freedom is seen as being radical. We are living in a world where truth has gone from being self-evident to being dangerous. And because of that, hatred is now divided into 2 types. The hatred of the so-called far right, which brings us here today to debate this issue, and then there is the righteous hatred, the acceptable hatred, the kind that raises no concern because it is claimed to serve a higher good. This righteous hatred is what targeted Charlie Kirk in the United States or Quentin Derenc in France. It is the same hatred that led an Antifa activist to throw gasoline at babies during the March for Life in Portugal, and yet the establishment parties lack the courage to condemn it as terrorism. Distinguished members, Charlie Kirk, Quentin Derenc, and many others were not attacked because they are far-right. They are labeled as far-right so they can be attacked. And for us, we stand here on our path and our values, because when the truth becomes dangerous, the men and women who speak it become indispensable. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Albana Voxi, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I thank the rapporteur, Ms. Gardini, for the timely and important report. I will focus on an issue very close to my heart. Last December, on behalf of EPP Women, I proposed a resolution to EPP Political Assembly on combating violence against women in politics and public life, which was adopted unanimously. And I also discussed this with the chair of EPP Group, Mr. Ispan, to propose a similar one. Why? All women here know the reality. We carry it every day under our skin. We know how hard it is not only to enter politics, but to stay in it, especially in countries like mine, where institutions fail to protect women and often stand on the side of those who violate them. Across Europe, women in politics face offline and online attacks, not because of what they say, but simply because they are women. The violence is not accidental. In many cases, it is designed to push strong, independent, professional women out of public life and to preserve power in closed, male-dominated systems. Very often, perpetrators are colleagues, mayors, ministers, people in power. What message women in Albania get
When a woman candidate is threatened inside a polling station by a criminal group that if she does not leave the place, they will take her daughter. Or when the socialist chair of a parliamentary group humiliates a women opposition MP, suggesting her number starts with 0900, a reference to a sex hotline, and he remains unpunished. When Prime Minister himself insults and offends opposition women and not only. This is a direct attack on dignity, equality and democratic values. When such acts go unpunished, they become model of behavior. They teach men and boys in every home that this is acceptable and they can do the same with their sisters, mothers and girlfriends. These attacks have no borders, no party. That is why this resolution is not only timely, it is overdue. Let us support this resolution not as a formality, but as a commitment to protect democracy by protecting women. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on Christophe Tchallou. You have 2 minutes.
Monsieur le Président, mes chers collègues, le rapport de notre collègue Madame Elisabetta Gardini vise à objectiver un phénomène, hélas, de plus en plus présent dans nos démocraties. Nous ne pouvons qu'être interpellés par la très juste remarque qui souligne l'effet dissuasif de ces violences pour les générations plus jeunes, pour les femmes, pour les personnes issues de groupes minoritaires qui souhaiteraient s'engager en politique. Et nous le voyons, y compris au niveau local et régional, où se sont développés ces phénomènes de violence et d'intimidation, de pression ces dernières années. Je veux d'ailleurs, comme l'indique le rapport, saluer les travaux du Congrès des pouvoirs locaux et régionaux en Europe dans ce domaine. Je me permets de signaler également la création récente d'un observatoire de la défense de la démocratie locale par le Conseil des communes et régions d'Europe et l'Association basque des municipalités. Dans un contexte de plus en plus violent, l'engagement dans la vie publique recule. Nous l'avons vu, y compris dans mon pays, la France, lors des récentes élections municipales. Nous avons constaté une diminution de 35 000 candidatures par rapport à 2014. Dans un département comme le mien, dans le centre de la France, dans les 2/3 des communes, une seule liste était proposée aux électeurs. Diminution très importante. Alors effectivement, le risque d'agression ou de pression morale n'est pas le seul facteur, mais il pèse largement dans la crise de l'engagement. Une démocratie saine se doit de garantir un accès juste aux responsabilités électives et les conditions de leur exercice. C'est la raison pour laquelle nous ne pouvons tolérer aucune attaque physique ni harcèlement envers nos élus. Je pense également tout particulièrement à notre collègue, l'élu écologiste de Marseille, Amine Kessassi, désormais adjoint au maire. Son intégrité physique est aujourd'hui directement menacée, notamment parce qu'il lutte contre le narcotrafic. Et je regrette d'ailleurs que le rapport ne mentionne pas cet acte de violence, alors même que le rapport accorde un développement qui m'a interpellé sur le décès du militant français Quentin de Ranc. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. I call on Damien Cotier. You have 2 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Le rapport que nous traitons aujourd'hui est important et on doit s'enlever de l'idée, si c'est l'idée que des personnes peuvent avoir en écoutant ce débat, qu'aujourd'hui les politiques s'occupent d'eux-mêmes. Ils ne s'occupent pas de se protéger eux-mêmes, ils s'occupent aujourd'hui, nous nous occupons aujourd'hui à travers ce débat, de protéger nos institutions et donc de protéger la démocratie. Et j'aimerais remercier la rapporteure parce que ce rapport est important et il arrive à un bon moment puisque nous voyons, et ça a été rappelé par de nombreux orateurs aujourd'hui, nous voyons un phénomène inquiétant qui est en augmentation dans tous nos pays, à savoir une violence verbale, mais aussi parfois une violence physique qui augmente à l'égard des représentants des autorités, des membres des autorités ou des personnes élues. Et ça n'est pas possible de faire vivre notre démocratie si on laisse cela se développer. Alors on doit être très clair, et le rapport l'est, la résolution l'est également, le débat des idées, un débat parfois vif, parfois passionné même, et on le vit parfois dans cette Assemblée, le débat vif est important, il n'est pas un problème, il est même constitutif du débat démocratique et il faut lui laisser toute sa place. Les arguments peuvent être forts, mais tout cela doit toujours se faire dans le respect de la personne et on attaque des idées, ou on combat des idées plus exactement, on se bat pour les siennes, mais on n'attaque pas, on ne combat pas l'autre personne et jamais la violence, ni verbale, ni physique, n'est quelque chose d'acceptable. Si ça devait être le cas, eh bien, nous ne pouvons pas exercer la démocratie librement. Ça a été dit et des exemples sont cités dans le rapport. Il n'est pas possible pour les personnes de maintenir leurs idées. Parfois, elles doivent elles se sentent sous pression de modifier leur position ou elles ne souhaitent plus être candidates à un poste électif. Et ça, c'est quelque chose qui vide la démocratie de tout son sens. C'est d'ailleurs la raison pour laquelle j'ai déposé un projet de loi au Parlement suisse pour que les menaces de violence contre les élus soient poursuivies d'office, comme elles le sont pour les fonctionnaires. Nous devons agir avec des recommandations, c'est ce que nous propose le rapport, et je vous invite, chers collègues, à le soutenir.
Thank you. Ms. Angraves, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. This report comes at a crucial time when truth, democracy and those who support fairness, equality and democratic processes are under attack. These attacks and the threat of attacks are very, very real. Violence against politicians is alarmingly on the rise in many Council of Europe member and observer states. We must stand unequivocally together and condemn all forms of violence against politicians and reaffirm that violence has no place in democracy. Threats of violence are felt at all levels of democracy. Local city councillors, members of parliament, government ministers and members of the European Parliament have all suffered. Even families have felt the cold chill of physical and online threats. In Ireland, I have been targeted online, as have many of my Sinn Féin party colleagues, with abuse and death threats, and others right across the political divide have suffered as well. We've also had protests of family homes, constituency offices, some which have turned particularly violent. However, these threats do not land on everybody equally. Women and representatives of minority groups are disproportionately targeted, including through gender-based violence, sexual threats, misogyny, homophobic or racist attacks. Democracy is precious, it's under a threat and it must be protected. While there are elements in this report that I cannot support, there are amendments to be voted on later from the UEL group that I hope will be accepted and so allow me to support it. While we should not ignore threats of violence, we will not be frightened into submission by the enemies of democracy. Otherwise, they win. I have campaigned and will continue to campaign for a democratic, safe and welcoming Europe.
Thank you. Ms. Darmagan-Kantan, you have 2 minutes. It's not here, so we'll go to the next. Ms. Torres-Pures, you have 2 minutes.
Danke, Herr Präsident, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Die liberale Demokratie lebt von einem Paradox. Einerseits schützt sie die Freiheit des Wortes, auch die schärfste Kritik. Andererseits darf sie nicht zulassen, dass die Freiheit des Wortes zur Waffe gegen Menschen wird, dass aus Debatten Drohungen und aus Meinungsverschiedenheiten Hasskampagnen entstehen. Der Bericht, für den ich mich bei Kollegin Elisabetta Giardini bedanken möchte, zeigt, Frauen sind von Gewalt und Hetze überproportional betroffen. Und das ist kein Randphänomen. Es ist ein Angriff auf den Kern unserer Demokratie. Wenn jede zweite Abgeordnete in Europa sexualisierte Gewalt, massive Anfeindungen bis hin zu Todesdrohungen erlebt, ist das kein individuelles Versagen, sondern es zeigt strukturellen Handlungsbedarf auf. Also regulativen Handlungsbedarf ebenso wie mehr Wachsamkeit in der politischen Kultur, damit auch derartige Angriffe nicht als berufsbedingtes Risiko abgetan werden können. Demokratie bedeutet, dass wir uns verpflichten, Online-Übergriffe zur Einschüchterung von politisch Verantwortlichen auf allen Ebenen wirksam zu bekämpfen und dafür zu sorgen, dass eine uneingeschränkte, maßgebliche Teilhabe am politischen Leben, insbesondere für Frauen, ohne Angst und Hetze gewährleistet wird. Und der Report verweist zu Recht auf den New Democratic Pact, einem neuen Gesellschaftsvertrag, der auch klare Grenzen setzt. Nicht gegen Kritik, sondern gegen Drohungen. Nicht gegen Leidenschaft, sondern gegen Gewalt. Und Dafür muss der Europarat seine Stimme erheben, damit Demokratie und Pluralismus eben nicht verstummen.
Thank you, Mr. Vladimir Tortovic. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When we talk about violence and hate speech, we are talking about those in power in Serbia. Inside the National Assembly, this is no longer debate. This is abuse of power normalized. Opposition's MP are not challenged. They are targeted. Traitors, foreign mercenaries, enemies of the state. They're denied the right to speak, shouted down, pushed out. This is not politics, that is repression. And outside Parliament, the same repression continues. From Belgrade to Novi Sad, across the country, elected representatives are pushed aside, silenced, treated as intruders in the institutions they were elected to serve. And beyond institution, people face everyday police brutality and the media blackout enforced from the office of the regime. Then it reached the street. Pressure, intimidation, targeting, activities, journalists, citizens, all made to understand that speaking out is punished. Gatherings are restricted, people are questioned, even presence becomes suspicion. Fear is no longer an exception, it is the method. And above all this, surveillance. Thousands of cameras across cities, feeding system built to monitor, identify, and track people in real time. A government that speaks about European values while building Chinese-style surveillance state based on facial recognition and mass monitoring. Violence, hate speech, pressure, surveillance. This is a model of rule, a system where dissent is treated and opposition is an enemy to be eliminated. And when those in power turn institution, language, police force, and technology against their own people, well, this is Serbia today. Thank you.
Thank you. This was our last speaker. I remind members that the debate will resume at 4:30 p.m. this afternoon.
The next item on the agenda is questions to Mr. Alain Berset, the Secretary General of the Council of Europe. After his opening words, Mr. Berset will respond to questions from our members of the Assembly. Please, the floor is yours for 3 minutes.
So, thank you very much, Madam President, dear Petra, Madam Secretary General of the Parliamentary Assembly, Excellencies, members of the Parliamentary Assembly. Well, let me start maybe this intervention today by mentioning the most recent elections in Hungary, Bulgaria. People have spoken. Both elections show that democracy is alive, and we need to build, I think, on this momentum, especially at this challenging time. No one knows this better than the people of Ukraine. The last time we met, they were going through the harshest winter of the war without heat and electricity. Attacks on the critical infrastructure were relentless. Peace negotiations were stalled. One of member states was bracing for possible military action by one of our closest allies. We thought, how can it get worse? But then another war broke on Europe's border. It has shaken the global economy and increased our sense of instability and need for democratic security. And 3 months later, the situation in the Middle East occupies a central place in your debates, and rightly so. Europe is a geographical reality. No major crisis is ever truly far from Europe. Not for its energy, not for its economy, not for its security. But this war cannot eclipse what is happening in Ukraine. Ukraine, where Russia's full-scale invasion has entered its 5th year, where peace is still elusive, but where we are making progress on accountability, including the Special Tribunal for the crime of aggression. And the ministerial session in Chisinau next month will be important for our support to Ukraine. It will also advance key priorities on migration and foreign information manipulation and interference, and it will do so in full respect of the convention system and the values we stand for. They are our compass in this period of rupture, where each unchallenged threat or use of force threatens the legal and democratic foundations of lasting security in Europe. So, thank you for your attention, and I look forward now to your questions.
Thank you very much, Alain, also for keeping the time. We will now listen to questions on behalf of the political groups and then hear a response from Mr. Berset to those questions. Please, will these speakers limit their intervention to 30 seconds? And I remind colleagues that you should ask one single question and not make speeches. The first on my list on behalf of the SOC group is Azadeh Rohan. Please, Azadeh.
Madam President, thank you, Secretary General. The European Convention on Human Rights has long been a cornerstone of the Council of Europe, and the interpretation of the Convention has been a matter for the European Court of Human Rights. Now that some governments have opened a discussion, even if the outcome will only be a declaration, many are rightfully concerned that such a declaration with an unclear legal status could risk challenging the independence of the court. As member states and institutions of the Council of Europe, how do we ensure that the independence and authority of the European human rights are fully protected and not undermined? Thank you.
Mr. Secretary General.
So I thank you for the question, and it's a good occasion for me to recall a fundamental principle in this context and in this hemicycle. Independence of the court must be and remain intangible. That's exactly the reason why we needed to act. When we are confronted with such an open letter, like it was the case last year, one third of all the members of the European Union in an open letter, not addressed to the Council of Europe, putting in question the independence of the courts, trying to make pressure on the case of the court, it is a serious matter. And then the second point is a question of methods. It's about the methods. And the method was to choose between, well, to act as if nothing was happening and to take the risk to let the pressure go higher and maybe to go in a position where then it is not more possible to channel this pressure. It was one point of the alternative, or the other point was to accept the situation. We didn't decide to launch this discussion, but to accept the situation, to take the point, and to try to channel this discussion in a proper and correct manner. And my goal with this was on two elements. The first element was to take back this discussion in Strasbourg and not to allow that to have discussion on the European Court of Human Rights and on Strasbourg, not in Strasbourg. First element. Second element, to channel this discussion at the political level where it must be done, and not accepting pressure on the court. And it was in this situation that we we invited for this ministerial conference in December. And this channeling this discussion leads to a political declaration. And your question is, what should we expect from this political declaration? I mean, first element is to mention here that it is not the first time that we have political declaration from the Committee of Ministers concerning the court. We have a quite long list of experience on this. I can remember there was, I think, a declaration in Interlaken in 2010. It was one in Izmir. We had in Copenhagen in 2020, and we have some others. And not always on technical issues. Sometimes also concerning, well, substantial issues, as it is the case here with migration. And we have some experience how to deal with this. It is not undermining the independence of the court, because independence of the court, as I said before, must be and remain intangible. But it gives the possibility for member states, when they see a concern, to address this in an organized manner and to give what they think about the challenges that they are facing with migration. And then the court can, if they will, read this, take this information in account. It is in a better way than just reading the papers, newspapers, and seeing the pressure made on the court, and integrating or not this in their views on the thing. That means my proposal with this is to integrate this in the field that we know. It is a known world for us to have this kind of declaration, recalling once again, it is the most important point, independence of the court is intangible and must remain intangible, because I fully agree with you. I mean, the system of the convention system, and the European Convention of Human Rights is the most important text that we have. And I can maybe also say in this context that our continent was not producing that much of that level of text. We had the Magna Carta, we had the Déclaration des droits de l'homme et des citoyens in 1789, and the European Convention of Human Rights.
Thank you. And next we are listening to Emanuel Singaris on behalf of EPP.
Danke, Frau Vorsitzende. Und ich möchte mich auch bedanken für Ihre Aktivitäten, Herr unser Generalsekretär, und auch möchte ich mich ein paar Fragen stellen. Erste Frage ist, es geht, dass wir sind am 12. und 14. in Chișinău wird eine endgültige Sitzung sein, um dieses Special Tribunal einzurichten. Finanzielle Seite von diesem Tribunal ist noch nicht vorbereitet. Wie könnten wir alle beide dieses spezielle Tribunal auf die Füße stellen? Es wird eine sehr wichtige Frage sein, wie schnell wird das kommen? Und zweite, diese Plattformen...
Herzlichen Dank für diese Frage. Secretary General, please.
Ja, vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin. Ich habe nur die erste Frage gehört und ich werde mal versuchen, auch die erste Frage zu beantworten. Vielen Dank für die Erwähnung von diesem sehr wichtigen Moment, das wir haben werden in Chișinău in 3 Wochen für mal den Sondertribunal. Ich glaube, wir sind da in einer sehr guten Situation für den Moment. Wir haben im Moment 19 Staaten, Mitgliedstaaten, die sich bereit erklärt haben, das zu unterstützen. Und dann, wir haben auch einen Staat außerhalb von Europa, mit Costa Rica, auch bereit, es zu tun. Das ist ein sehr starkes Signal. Und jetzt muss man es klar sagen, wir sind bereit. Wir können sehr schnell gehen. Was brauchen wir? Wir brauchen Ressourcen, Finanzen von Staaten bereit zu unterstützen und dann eine Konfirmation, eine Bestätigung, dass diese 19 Staaten plus andere, wir müssen auch noch den Druck erhöhen, um andere zu haben, auch bereit sind, es zu tun. Das heißt, es ist auch ein Appell, das ich hier vielleicht machen kann. Es gibt hier im Saal Vertreterinnen und Vertreter von mehr als 46 Staaten, Mitgliedstaaten und andere dazu. Und es scheint mir sehr wichtig, dass man wirklich alle Möglichkeiten nutzt jetzt, um wirklich sichtbar zu machen, dass diese Unterstützung und diese Schritte sind extrem wichtig und die müssen so schnell wie es geht, so schnell wie möglich jetzt passieren.
Thank you very much. On behalf of ECPA, Victoria Diplom, please.
Mr. Secretary General, the Council of Europe positions itself as a guardian of the rule of law and accountability. In the case concerning Mr. Jagland, including the elements linked to the Epstein-related materials, many observers perceive that developments have been slow, including the Council's official reaction. How do you justify this pace, and what concrete steps will you take to ensure that timely and credible outcomes? And can you commit to a clear timeline for concluding these processes? Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary General.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for this question. I think full transparency in this matter is my guiding principle. And maybe I would take this occasion to complete clarity on the facts. I have already informed the Presidency Committee on the 23rd of March and the Bureau of the Assembly on the 20th of April, and I will continue to keep you informed regularly about the next steps and regularly updated. I do not agree with what you are telling about the fact that we are slow. I don't think we are slow at all. The opposite is true. And let me maybe start telling you that I requested an initial informal internal administrative inquiry to establish basic facts, as we had some elements appearing in the media last November, and I wanted to establish facts and to know, including on whether a Council of Europe resources or facilities had been involved. And that inquiry, it was made between November, December, and January, beginning of this year. It was an informal one, it was an administrative one, but it was possible to confirm contacts, and this inquiry provided also preliminary elements. But at the same time, I need to be clear on this. It could not use investigative powers such as a formal evidence request or forensic analysis. And on this basis, I refer the matter to the Independent Directorate of Internal Oversight, DIO, that we have at the Council of Europe, which has now opened a full investigation into possible wrongdoing affecting the organization. And this work will take some few months. It is always a trade-off that we need to do between, how fast we want to go, but the level of the quality is essential. We need to have the highest possible level of quality about the results, and to make sure full transparency is also requesting, to have a high quality level done for the job, and it is not possible to do this in 2 or 4 or 6 weeks. It will take 6 months. That's not that long if we imagine that we started recently, and it will take until September. I just want also to add in this context that we have another element working right now. It is this criminal investigation concerning Mr. Jagland in Norway. We have been requested to collaborate, and I can assure you that we have been really as quick, as fast as possible, and fully collaborating with Økokrim in this context, and we'll continue to do so.
Thank you very much. Next one is Yevgenia Kravchuk on behalf of ALDE.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary General, with regards to the special tribunal, my question is, when do you think we can move from the phase 0 advanced team to the phase 1 skeleton tribunal? and what concrete steps will be taken after the Chisinau meeting, after the Committee of Ministers sits and takes the decision on the enlarged partial agreement, and what role Council of Europe can play in enlarging this number from, that you mentioned, 20 countries to more. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary General, you have to.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for this question. I think once again, accountability is essential, because we know that without accountability, there can be no credible, no just, and no lasting peace. And we are working since, and this Parliamentary Assembly and the Council of Europe are working since a long time already for accountability. We should never forget the court, European Court of Human Rights, addressing every day violations of human rights in the context of the war in Ukraine, including we have also this interstate case published last July. I mean, it shows that the first pillar of accountability is fully working. We have the second with the Register of Damage, and last December the creation of the Claims Commission. It is also working well, and you are addressing the third pillar, the Special Tribunal. I think we have now a good situation. We have 19 member states willing to join with clear statements. Some of them telling we are joining without asking about the how will be the budget and the finance, and others tell us we want to join, but we will make the decisive step once we have a precise idea about the budget. That makes the difference. But now the next conference in Chisinau will be key, because it is the first moment we will be address this and to have really this step made, and then we are able to envisage the next steps. In parallel, we are working with an advanced team. I mean, on the so-called skeleton, tribunal to prepare all the elements. We have for this funding from the European Union. We are really thankful for the European Union to fund this work, and we have also a commitment from the Netherlands for the first step, this skeleton tribunal. But we need now to have a clear budget for the next steps as soon as possible. That must be clear. We are not able to define, I mean, the budget for the tribunal, and I think for the member states, they are also expecting this information to come now, to go then as fast as possible. Let's now imagine we will have a full commitment for the second steps, full transparent information about the budget, and then those 19 states plus Costa Rica able to do, I mean, in the internal procedures, what they need to really join with the budget. I mean, it could go fast. And why am I not able to tell you a date where it is possible to open? Because it is not depending on us. We are ready. We are not slowing down the rhythm. The opposite is true. But we need now really a commitment from the states with the budget, with the resources, with finance to make those steps happen. And if it's coming, and I hope that Chisinau will offer to all of us a momentum to make this clear and to prepare then to have the next step, then it could go quite fast. And that's why I'm not able to give you a date. For enlarging, that's a very important question that you are addressing. I think it was also always my message to Ukrainian authorities. I mean, we are, at the Council of Europe, the perfect organization for being able to enlarge not only to all members, all countries from the European continent, but also beyond. Because we have this experience. We have conventions where, I mean, a lot of countries from different continents are participating, not just observing what we are doing. They are full participating to conventions, and we have this experience, and we need to use this to enlarge. It is, at my level, for example, to address this by every occasion that I have meeting with people from other countries, other continents, to make the appeal to join. And the step in Chisinau will be decisive also for this, because then it is concrete. You know, and it's possible to say, okay, you are not joining an idea that is not clear. We have now the support, the necessary support to do the next step, and please come. It is the moment to join, to support Ukraine, to support accountability, but first of all, to support the idea of a world where, peaceful relations and rule of law and accountability will prevail, and not a world where destruction, force, violence, and impunity will prevail. It is really a strong statement that we need also beyond Europe.
Thank you very much. And on behalf of UL, I call on Mrs. Patricia Stevenson. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. How do you view the approach of Council of Europe and Member States in relation to the Chisinau process and the political declaration on the ECHR, particularly the lack of transparency and engagement with stakeholders, including civil society organisations, who have very legitimate interest in the outcomes of this process, particularly in light of the Reykjavik commitment to greater transparency? Should the committee, for example, have formally invited PACE members' views on the matter? I think PACE members have been notably excluded from the entire process up to this point.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Secretary General, please.
Okay, thank you. If I just, the sound was not perfect. It was about ECHR, Chisinau, migration, and inclusiveness with PACE. That's correct. And civil society.
The PACE members and also the civil society groups that were very much not included in the process.
I thank you. Well, this process, and again, I'm really open to speak about all questions about the methods, the right methods to address situations that we are facing. I didn't choose, neither you, that we had 1/3 of the members of the European Union, 1/5 of the members of the Council of Europe, launching this kind of discussion on migration and the European Convention of Human Rights and the case law of the court. We didn't choose this. We had to act with this because it is just a reality. And I decided, I think, well, I claim here that it was the right thing to do, to try to take certain control about this discussion and not to let this discussion just happening without us. That was the reason why I proposed to take this back in Strasbourg, to have this ministerial conference. And I think my impression it is that this process is bringing some fruits. I hope. We will see. We can make an assessment afterwards and to see if it's right or not to do this. That's an important element. About the inclusiveness and civil society, it is clear in this situation that it is a discussion between member states. To be honest, I was not participating to this discussion. I was not in the room as they discussed about the declaration. I was not there. It is between member states. And as you know, we are strongly interested to have a strong participation of the civil society at all possible levels in the organization. We are even organizing precisely standards as we want to work with civil society and as we can also develop this within the Secretariat. We are really fully not only open but willing to have this also made much more. By the way, by more or less all my visits and bilateral visits in member states, I more or less always meet also civil society representatives, because it is extremely important, not only here in Strasbourg, not only in Secretariat, but also visiting countries. It was the case also for the recent visits I've made. Thank you. And so for about PACE, again, it must be also probably a discussion between the Committee of Ministers, CDDH, and PACE, but I think it is a process where the member states have been involved, and we will see what comes out of this discussion. But it is also depending where it was launched. Well, maybe what I can tell to this.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to other speakers, and will take them in groups of 3. Please also you limit your interventions to 30 seconds, and we start with Lord Don Twick from UK.
Secretary General, when you spoke to the Committee of Ministers in March, you said the destruction of the international legal rights order called for a bold, clear and values-based vision for Europe in the future as a whole. I think that's a right and noble ambition, and I fully support it. Can you tell us more how you think we can achieve that goal?
Well, I thank you. Oh, sorry.
The next one on my list is from Armenia, Amen Gregorian.
Secretary General,
Today in Armenia, in a very tense and democratically challenging election process, the ruling party and its leader are promoting a narrative that if they do not win the upcoming elections, a new war will follow. In your view, as a person who is engaged with regional processes, to what extent is it respectful toward international actors who are making efforts to promote peace in the region, specifically regarding the Washington agreements? And how might this affect the trust within Armenian society toward peace initiatives of the international community? Thank you.
And the third one is Mrs. Gökçe from Turkey.
Mr. Secretary General, my question to you is about the targeting of the members of the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities in Council of Europe. Hasan Akgün, the mayor of Büyükçekmece, was serving right here in this very chamber. He has been detained for 11 months and there is still no indictment against him. Tunç Soyer was the president of the Congress of Regions. He has been detained for 10 months. There is an indictment against him, but he was released in that case. However, as he was about to be released, 2 additional investigations were launched against him and precautionary detention orders were issued. Now permission has been requested to initiate an investigation against Ayşe Ünlüce, the mayor of Eskişehir, and the head of the Turkish delegation. At this rate, do you think there will be any members left from Turkey in the Congress of Local and...
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary General. Now the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you very much for those questions. I think the first question was about, I would say, the effectiveness of what we are doing. What can we do to have a higher impact, to make sure that we are not only speaking, eloquently on different elements, but we have really a positive impact for the population on our continent, if I understand the question well. And I think we need, for doing this, because I strongly believe that we are confronted with a kind of rupture in the international order, what we are seeing right now. We are not more in the same situation as we have been, a really positive situation, I would say, in most cases, in most parts of the continent, not everywhere, but positive, evolution in what we will call the right direction, supporting rule of law, human rights, and more democracy. And now we are challenged on those elements. And I think the most important thing is to take into account the context where it is happening. We need to see the geopolitical context. We need to see that it is not exactly the same thing to make some progress on human rights if we have a positive development at economic level or not. If it is not the same thing to do if we have an explosion of inequalities or in the opposite, a strong, positive way, reducing inequalities. It is not the same situation if we have concerns about the access to energy, to healthcare, or if we have not those concerns. Saying this, knowing that we have a huge diversity of contexts in Europe. And that's why I think part of the answer to your really deep question, I would say, is to consider that we need to adapt, not to renounce to something, but to be stronger for our values and to adapt to this world where maybe we are not more as convergent as we would wish for ourselves, where the world is more divergent and we are under a strong pressure about the values, about force, about violence, about the pressure on the rule of law coming from other continents, from partners even. And we need to take this into account, and that's why one of the points that we are working on now is to think and to work on a possible reform of the Council of Europe. Not transforming the Council of Europe to do something differently, to transform, to be stronger for the values, taking more in account this context that we are facing right now. I think that's one of the important elements. And it starts, if I may be so clear, it starts by not allowing that we undermine and slowly are destroying what makes that we are strong. And I come back with this to the European Convention of Human Rights and European Court of Human Rights. We should never underestimate the strong role, the really strong role that the court and the decisions of the court played for this convergence over the last 70 or more than 60 years. And that's exactly why it is the core element we need not only to protect, but to make stronger. And it is, in my view, also the reason why we had to take this migration discussion of migration on the table and not to look away as member states started with this. And it is one of the reasons why I'm traveling to United Kingdom this week, because it was only where it was possible to have all the program set, exactly to address also those elements. And that's the reason why I'm also trying to share this view on the continent, on the Council of Europe, with as well, many of member states as we can, and also sharing with you, with the Parliamentary Assembly, and having exchanges exactly on those elements. So I thank you for this question. It is a fundamental question, in a fundamental moment for the continent and for our societies. I go to the second question on Armenia. Thank you very much for asking. I think we are at a decisive moment, and in a broader, as I was just describing right now, in a broader context of instability and war at Europe's border, South Caucasus has a real opportunity and responsibility as well to move towards lasting peace and stability. And I want also to mention in this situation, this context, the efforts by Armenia and Azerbaijan to normalize relations, and therefore particularly important not only for the two countries but for the stability in the wider region. Fully aware, evidently, obviously about the fact that we will have elections very soon. I think this is an important moment in democratic society, in democratic life, and I mean humanitarian issues also in the context of the war, knowing that we have elections, remain critical. I think I see two elements. One about the whole region and situation with the war between the peace, and we hope the next positive step between Armenia and Azerbaijan and the detainees. It is clearly having an impact on all the political discussions in Armenia. You know this better than me. And the other element is what can we do to make sure that we have a free, fair and good situation for the elections in all countries, by the way. And I mean, we will see what will happen in Armenia, but I want to mention in this context that after the risk that we are seeing more or less everywhere on the, manipulation, interferences, disinformation, I mean, it's concerning all the countries. This is exactly the reason why we are working on a possible framework convention on disinformation and foreign interferences. We need to work together on a kind of toolbox to see what the governments can use or not use to protect democracy. Because the risk we are facing is to take measures or actions undermining democratic values. And we need to find the right balance in this, and I think it is probably also an important element for the whole region. On the third question, where are you? Yeah, thank you for asking. I mean, well, you can also understand that for me it's quite difficult to comment on individual judicial cases. I know that it is, well, a bit frustrating, but my role, and I think my goal and my role is to do what I can to always support the instruments that we have, and first of all, the European Court of Human Rights, knowing that the cases can also appear there. But at the same time, when members of the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities are detained without indictment, and when judicial proceedings affect the head of a Congress delegation, this inevitably raises really serious concerns. And I mean, as you are asking, these are not only individual situations, they raise broader questions about due process. They raise questions about the use of pre-trial detention, about the appointment of trustees, about legal certainty, and the conditions for democratic representation at the local and regional level. I am, you can imagine, in close contact with the Congress on these cases, and we are following these developments. And I take also this occasion to recall that all member states are bound by the European Convention on Human Rights, and that includes, obviously, the guarantees relating to liberty, the guarantees relating to due process and fair trial, And these safeguards are particularly important where elected representatives are concerned. And saying this, my expectation is clear, full respect for all those elements, for the convention standards, and full respect for the democratic mandates of elected local representatives. You can imagine that in this context we will continue to remain engaged together with the Congress and within this decision and within its mandate.
Thank you. I have still 14 people who would like to ask questions on my list. I'm afraid we will not make all of them, but we come to the round of the next 3 members who would like to pose questions, and I start with Piero Fassino from Italy.
Grazie Segretario Generale. Lei sa quanto i Balcani sono una regione delicata per la stabilità europea. Lei stesso è stato in Serbia qualche settimana fa. E allora vorrei chiederle, questa Assemblea ha votato a grande maggioranza l'ammissione del Kosovo nell'Assemblea parlamentare e nel Consiglio d'Europa. Però la cosa continua a essere invece bloccata a livello del Comitato dei Ministri. Vorrei sapere come lei intende agire per cercare di sbloccare questo veto. Grazie.
Thank you very much. Next on my list is Ivanka Vasilevska from North Macedonia.
Monsieur le secrétaire général, permettez-moi de poser une question claire et directe. Le Conseil de l'Europe entend-il réagir et par quel mécanisme concret compte-t-il agir dans le cas de l'advocate Menkinovski, à qui était imposée une interdiction d'entrée de 10 ans en République de Bulgarie, alors même qu'il est activement engagé dans des procédures devant le Corps européen des droits de l'homme. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. And the third in this list is Bertrand Bouic from France.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Monsieur le Secrétaire Général, je voudrais vous interroger sur la nature du Conseil de l'Europe et de ses évolutions nécessaires que vous avez abordées. En effet, le Conseil de l'Europe ne peut fonctionner efficacement que dans un monde où l'on croit et où l'on fait vivre les valeurs du multilatéralisme. Il suffit de regarder autour de nous pour constater que le monde dans lequel s'est construit notre institution vacille. Le Conseil de l'Europe ne peut pas devenir un îlot qui répète son mantra, jugé dépassé par une grande part des États et parmi eux nos plus anciens alliés. Dans ce contexte, ma question est simple. Quelles évolutions entendez-vous impulser pour adapter le Conseil de l'Europe et continuer à lui faire jouer son rôle? Merci.
Mr. Secretary General.
Merci beaucoup. Je vais commencer par répondre peut-être à la question de Piero Fassino sur le Kosovo. J'étais effectivement en Serbie il y a peu. Je vais me rendre bientôt en Bosnie-Herzégovine. Il y a plusieurs, disons, échanges avec la région parce que je pense que c'est très très important non seulement d'être présent maintenant, mais de faire aussi les liens, de contribuer à tout ce qui peut être fait dans la région pour la stabilité, la paix, le dialogue et les échanges. Je crois que la question du Kosovo, en fait, est assez claire au Conseil de l'Europe. Il y a eu une demande d'adhésion qui a été reçue par le Comité des ministres, qui a demandé à l'Assemblée parlementaire de donner son avis. Un avis, après le travail qui a été réalisé, a été rendu. Et actuellement, c'est sur la table du comité des ministres qui doit prendre cette décision. Je crois, comme vous l'avez dit hier, j'étais dans la salle quand vous avez parlé de cette question-là. La situation un peu d'instabilité institutionnelle que nous avons maintenant n'aide pas. Elle a plutôt tendance à faire en sorte que tout le monde se dit « bon, on verra une fois que ce sera réglé ». Nous verrons bien ce qui va se passer la semaine prochaine. J'ai eu l'occasion d'ailleurs d'échanger ce matin avec Monsieur Glauc Konjuvka, le premier ministre, vice-premier ministre et ministre des Affaires étrangères et de la diaspora du Kosovo, aussi pour échanger à ce sujet. En même temps, nous avons besoin aussi, dans ce contexte, d'insister sur la nécessité de reprendre et poursuivre le dialogue entre Pristina et Belgrade, de tenter de pouvoir évoluer vers une normalisation des relations. Moi, ce qui me guide dans ces réflexions, et je crois que c'est pareil pour vous, ce sont les réflexions qui concernent les citoyennes et les citoyens qui vivent dans les pays, quelle que soit leur situation, quel que soit le groupe auquel ils s'identifient. C'est ça qui compte, c'est de pouvoir garantir une bonne protection des droits humains pour les personnes concernées. Et c'est un élément qui doit nous préoccuper, qui doit continuer à nous préoccuper. Et donc, je crois que voilà, il faut chaque fois que vous en parlez ici, c'est un message aussi qui est adressé au Comité des ministres. Cette question reste ouverte et il serait souhaitable de savoir comment les choses vont se poursuivre. Pour la question suivante, je vous remercie de l'avoir posée. Je ne suis pas sûr de connaître le cas que vous avez mentionné. Et donc, il est difficile pour moi de prendre une position, disons, sans avoir exactement une impression de ce que vous souhaitez aborder. Vous avez parlé de la Bulgarie. Je sais qu'il existe avec la Bulgarie naturellement toute une série de cas d'exécution des arrêts de la Cour qui concernent ce qu'on appelait les cas Humo-Linden, mais je ne crois pas que c'est ça que vous avez voulu aborder. Donc dans ces conditions, je vous propose que nous puissions nous retrouver peut-être aussi avec mon cabinet et comprendre quelle est la question exactement et qu'on essaye de vous porter une réponse. Ce sera en bilatéral et pas en public, mais d'apporter une réponse aussi précise que possible à la question que vous posez. Monsieur Wicks, merci beaucoup pour la question. J'ai, je crois, abordé certains éléments tout à l'heure dans une réponse précédente. Quelle est l'évolution? Eh bien, d'abord, je crois fondamentalement qu'on constate une fois de plus aujourd'hui, face à cette rupture, ce qu'on peut qualifier, je crois, de rupture de l'ordre mondial, que les valeurs portées par le Conseil de l'Europe et les lignes directrices, en fait, sont fondamentales. Nous connaissons des alternatives à la démocratie, à des relations fondées sur les règles, donc l'état de droit, et à une bonne protection des droits humains. Ce n'est pas qu'il n'y a pas d'alternative. Simplement, nous ne voulons pas vivre dans ces alternatives. Et il faut le dire non seulement clairement, mais aussi s'engager pour le réaliser. Bon, c'est ce que fait le Conseil de l'Europe, dans un contexte aujourd'hui qui est beaucoup plus mouvementé que c'était encore le cas il y a une quinzaine d'années, et qui évolue extrêmement rapidement. J'en parlais ce matin avec le vice-premier ministre de Moldova, Mihail Popsioy. La Moldova a pris la présidence du Conseil de l'Europe en novembre. Elle va pouvoir la passer à Monaco bientôt, en mai. Durant ces 6 mois, que s'est-il passé entre le kidnapping d'un président d'un pays, la discussion sur le Groenland qui est arrivé, qui est reparti, la guerre en Iran qui s'est développée dans les conditions que l'on connaît, toutes les conséquences que cette situation a aussi sur le soutien à l'Ukraine, parce qu'il existe cette tentation naturellement que nous combattons, de ne plus réussir à regarder toutes les situations et de regarder ailleurs qu'en Ukraine. Nous devons rester concentrés là-dessus. Tout ce qui s'est passé en 6 mois. Nous sommes confrontés non seulement à une rupture, mais à une transformation extrêmement rapide et il n'y a pas d'alternative là, je crois, enfin, ou alors on ne les veut pas, à tenir compte de ce contexte pour garder le cap sur les valeurs que nous avons. Et c'est la raison pour laquelle, je le redis, je pense que nous devons réfléchir à une certaine évolution du Conseil de l'Europe. Nous ne défendrons pas, dans le long terme, les droits humains sans considérer que ces droits humains doivent être défendus dans un contexte qui inclut les questions de sécurité démocratique, de solidité des institutions, d'accès à l'énergie, de sécurité énergétique et tous ces éléments-là. Et donc nous devons aborder cela. C'est une discussion que nous allons mener. J'ai eu l'occasion de partager avec les présidentes et présidents de groupe dimanche dernier un premier document aussi, première réflexion pardon, à ce sujet. Et je pense que nous allons devoir nous occuper de cela rapidement de manière à pouvoir rester aussi pertinent que possible.
So we get to the last 3 questions of this question hour. Mr. Sergei Sobolev from Ukraine, please.
Secretary General, my question is about the theme that arises here. Of course, it's special tribunal, the frozen Russian assets. Maybe it's a time for deep cooperation with the European Union because we have the same values. In order to have the real result in this question, mostly next month, but not next years. What is your opinion about this?
Thank you. And now Gerardo Giovalioni from San Marino.
Grazie Presidente. Signor Segretario Generale, innanzitutto la ringrazio anche a nome della delegazione per la visita nella nostra Repubblica e per l'orazione ufficiale di insediamento dei nostri capi di Stato. In particolare per aver citato il valore del diritto internazionale in relazione ai piccoli Stati come San Marino, che prevede all'articolo 1 della Carta Costituzionale che esso si uniforma alle norme contenute nelle dichiarazioni internazionali in tema di diritti dell'uomo e delle libertà fondamentali e la cui esistenza si basa sul diritto internazionale, la diplomazia e sulla loro conseguenza, la pace. Concorda con me che l'attitudine dei piccoli Stati verso la mediazione e il rispetto altrui debba essere maggiormente valorizzata e diffusa? Grazie.
Thank you. And finally, Hasan Tatchoy from Cyprus.
Mr. Secretary General, despite the Turkish Cypriots' demonstrated will in favor of the United Nations settlement plan in 2004 and the clear promises that followed, we have been living under complete international isolation for over 5 decades, unable to trade, travel freely, or participate in international bodies. What concrete steps will the Council of Europe take to finally end this isolation? With taking this opportunity, we hope to welcome you in Northern Cyprus upon your next visit to the island.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General.
Thank you. I try, Madam President, to be very brief in the answers. First question about special tribunal, and you mentioned the frozen asset and the collaboration with the European Union. I can tell you we have a very strong collaboration with the European Union, and fact is that the European Union is funding all the preparatory work for the establishment of the special tribunal, and we are able to finance the advanced team with this money. We are with close collaboration, and we will continue on this. Then the question about the financing and the resources for the special tribunal, it must be resourced and financed by states, by participants to the enlarged partial agreement, and then they need to decide how to work on this. Clearly, frozen assets is part of the possible discussion. This is done in the framework of the European Union, and it's a good thing. I think what we try to do between the Council of Europe and the European Union is really to have complementary work and to deliver where we are at best for delivering. And for what's concerning the Council of Europe, it is on the organization of the tribunal, on the elements preparing for states then to join. But we will be really happy if we have, as I said before, clear resources and financing and budget as soon as possible, and the member states must decide what they want to integrate in this. I will have very soon a meeting with Commissioner McGrath, just to underline the fact that we are also in close contact at a personal level. Pour les petits États, merci beaucoup encore pour l'accueil extraordinaire que j'ai reçu à Saint-Marin pour cette visite récente. Et quand même, à l'investiture des capitaines régents, de rappeler ici que cette assemblée vit une situation assez exceptionnelle d'avoir un de ses membres, une de vos collègues, Alice Mina, qui aujourd'hui est en fait chef d'État, co-chef d'État à Saint-Marin comme capitaine régente pour les 6 prochains mois. Et ça me permet d'insister sur un élément très important. Ce n'est pas la taille d'un pays qui détermine son influence. Ce qui détermine l'influence de pays, c'est le commitment au principe. C'est l'adhésion au principe et la ligne claire qui est suivie. Et il est une évidence que les plus petits États ont en fait un intérêt massif à avoir une ligne claire, lisible, par rapport aux principes et à ses engagements. Et c'est évidemment le cas de Saint-Marin et d'autres États membres que nous avons. Et vous êtes même en fait en première ligne pour les défendre. Et donc je pense que c'est un rôle extrêmement important qui assure aussi sur le plan international que naturellement ce n'est pas le pouvoir ou la force relative qui va déterminer la priorisation entre les États, mais c'est l'égalité entre États qui doit prévaloir, un élément je pense qui est extrêmement important. Last question about, thank you for the intervention. Well, I understand that for many Turkish Cypriots this is not abstract issue when we speak about the situation, the daily life in very concrete ways. You know the engagement of the Council of Europe. We think that the most important thing, and we stand ready also to support and to support renewed efforts for well a solution between all parties, and the elements that we are supporting with a solution in line with the agreed parameters of bizonal, bicommunal federation. I had, as you mentioned before, the possibility to visit the Republic of Cyprus last September. It was to prepare also the contacts and collaboration in the context of the presidency of the European Union, and thank you for mentioning also this. It was really interesting for me to be present. I would like to renew this strong support that we have for a solution, if it will be possible. I think maybe now it would be a window of opportunity that we should use, also after the recent election in the northern part of the island, and you can count on our support to do what we can in our possibilities to support this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary General, for your answers this morning. The Assembly will hold its next public sitting this afternoon at 3:30 p.m. with the agenda approved yesterday. The sitting is adjourned.